Chapter 1020. Bei Yunj looked at Song Yao. Tian, which one do you want to choose? Song Yao frowned and said hesitantly, there might be too many people in the cemetery. Let's go to the hospital. Bei Yunj was speechless. Lu Yuanxi and Chu Zhixing were speechless. This might be the only good young man present who believed in science and opposed superstition. Master Pei, we believe in science. Be brave. Lu Yuanxi stuffed the cemetery into Bei Yunj's hands. Bei Yunj was speechless. A few minutes later, Chu Zhixing took the castle, and Lu Yuanxi took the cemetery. Lu Yuanxi watched as Bei Yunj lazily put the cinema tickets he had snatched from him into his pocket, and walked towards the fork in the road. According to Bei Yunj's sixth sense, the cinema should be the safest. At most, an NPC would crawl out from behind the projection screen. Or, if the entire cinema was filled with NPCs, it would be quite lively. With this thought in mind, Bei Yunj walked in slowly. However, the two NPCs leading the way looked at Bei Yunj with a sigh. This young lady is really ruthless to herself. She actually dared to choose the home ground restoration. There were 4 forks in the cinema. Only one of them was the main storyline, and the others were all side routes. The restoration of the main storyline scene would carry out the terrifying essence of this cinema. Unfortunately, this was the case. The main storyline was the cinema in Bei Yunj's hands. She's really strong. I've been here for 2 months, and I don't want to go back to the main storyline scene. This is 2F** King suffocating. At the thought of the cinema, the two NPCs could not help but feel their scalps turn numb. Not long after, Bei Yunj, who had pushed open the door of the cinema, also realized that something was wrong. The cinema was dark and empty, but a black and white movie was playing on the large screen. It was like the most realistic documentary. The video was even stuck on the white screen, causing the lights in the cinema to flicker. Bei Yunj was speechless. Why was the atmosphere no better than the cemetery? Bei Yunj glanced at the clue and saw that she had to watch the movie for 10 minutes, so she could only choose a seat in the middle of the room and sit down. However, not long after, as the plot of the movie changed, the most terrifying scene in the movie appeared. The only grandson of the crazy, disfigured old woman was killed by the villagers on purpose. Every night, she would use her hoarse and unpleasant voice to sing songs to coax the children, but the children in the village were so scared that they didn't dare to sleep. In the end, the villagers couldn't take it anymore, and decided to seal the door of the old lady's house, and let her fend for herself. He didn't want the little girls in the village to know about this. She couldn't stop the adults, so she could only secretly pry open the old granny's wooden wall at night, hoping to save the old granny. She didn't expect that one day, when the little girl had just knocked out a small hole, and was delivering food to the old lady, the old woman didn't take it. Instead, she gave her a cruel smile and suddenly swung the iron hoe at her. A faint trace of blood appeared on the girl's face, and she retreated in fear. Then she saw with her own eyes that the old woman in front of her had abandoned her, stood on a stool, and hanged herself. She struggled with all her might, and her eyes became bloodshot. Finally, she gave her a strange smile. This scene happened to be directed at Bei Yunj. She saw with her own eyes that the old woman stopped breathing. The girl in the movie was so scared that she burst into tears. Bei Yunj, who was watching the same scene, turned pale. A memory fragment in her mind overlapped with the scene in front of her. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared on the screen of the movie. Chapter 1021. It was a person struggling with all her might, tugging at the rope around her neck. She was behind Bei Yunj, hanging in front of the projection equipment in the theater. The atmosphere was oppressive, helpless, and desperate. However, at this moment, Bei Yunj's eyes were red as she sat stiffly on the chair. In her mind were countless memories that had torn her personality apart. Yunj. Song Yao called Bei Yunj a few times. It was only when she heard the last word that Bei Yunj looked up instinctively. However, this was Song Yao's first time seeing Bei Yunj have such a gaze. Emptiness, helplessness, and a trace of cold vigilance and hostility. It was as if she had been abandoned. Song Yao pursed her lips and found that the special effects here were much scarier than what she had seen just now. Yunj, it's all fake. Song Yao's eyes were beautiful as she reached out to touch her head instinctively and coaxed her gently. Bei Yunji's eyelashes fluttered. When she saw that it was Song Yao, her expression was calm, but her eyes were a little dry. Then, before Song Yao could say anything, the person sitting in the seat suddenly reached out and hugged Song Yao's waist. Her voice was imperceptibly hoarse. "Why did you only come to find me now?" Song Yao had seen Bei Yunji in high spirits countless times, so when she suddenly saw this person in front of her, her throat felt inexplicably choked. Song Yao explained softly. "The elevator in the hospital is really broken. I can only take the fire stairs down." "Yunji, don't you want me to send you?" Song Yao grabbed Bei Yunji's hand and wrinkled her nose. She was a little worried. With Bei Yunji's state just now, Song Yao did not want to see it again in her life. "No need. I still have something on. Go back early." Bei Yunji lowered the brim of her hat, and her voice sounded the same as usual. She only knocked her head lazily. "What can Master Pei do? Go back early." With that said, Lu Yuanxi hesitated for a moment. "Song Yao, you're going back so late. Should I send you?" Song Yao was the only one who was treated like a girl. "Then help me send Tian back. I'll get going first." Bei Yunji held her phone and waved at them. Then he walked toward the intersection not far away. Song Yao looked at Bei Yunji's back and frowned instinctively. "What's wrong? Is Master Pei crying inside?" Lu Yuanxi asked Song Yao excitedly. Song Yao shook her head and muttered, "It's just very strange." "What's strange?" Chu Zhixing asked. After Song Yao regained her senses, she did not say anything and only said, "I'm going back too. I don't need you to send me off." With that said, Song Yao unconsciously followed behind Bei Yunji, afraid that something would happen to Bei Yunji on the way. At the subway station, Bei Yunji looked distracted and did not notice Song Yao not far away. Until an hour later, Song Yao saw Bei Yunji arrive home with her own eyes before she turned and left. 3 days in a row, Bei Yunji had been writing reports all night and only rested for 2 to 3 hours during the day. On the 4th day, Bei Yunji returned to the computing institute. Inside, a chubby intern was telling dirty jokes to girls. When he saw Bei Yunji's red eyes, he teased, "Oh, Master Pei, did you indulge too much?" Then Bei Yunji, who was about to leave, suddenly turned around, raised her leg, and kicked him in the butt. Bei Yunji had his hands in his pockets and a document report under his forearm. He glanced sideways and his casual appearance made him look even more difficult to deal with. "You have a lot to do?" The others could clearly feel that Bei Yunji's aura today was "Don't provoke me." End of chapter. Chapter 1022. The fat intern had always been unrestrained and liked to joke too much. However, he did not expect someone to make a move in the institute. When the teaching staff saw this scene, they were also stunned. "Pei, manage your intern well." Bei Yunji glanced at him, restrained her aura, and turned to leave. The other girls cheered in their hearts. This damn fatty deserved to be beaten. He liked to make disgusting jokes every day and was so confident. F***CK. Teacher, what kind of background does this woman have? She's too damn arrogant. Before the fat intern could finish speaking, he was stopped by the teaching staff. "Shut up. Are you tired of living? How dare you challenge her? In the entire institute, who would dare to make Bei Yunji unhappy?" The fat intern was stunned. He did not expect the teaching staff to reprimand him like this because of Bei Yunji. However, Bei Yunji was clearly a few years younger than him. The fat intern lowered his head. No one saw the indignation in his eyes. "What's wrong with you? I heard that you hit an intern the moment you came in." Bei Yunji looked at the project book and started to prepare for the experiment. She said leisurely, "I overdid it." Si Qingyan was speechless. Then, "Isn't your project progressing too quickly? Won't your brain be damaged if you use it like this?" Si Qingyan could not help but touch Bei Yunji's enviable head. However, the next moment, he was shocked by the unreal temperature. "Damn, it's so hot." Bei Yunji glanced at him. "If there's nothing else, get out." "Bei Yunji, have you gone crazy these few days? You're running a high fever and you're still working on the project. Do you think it's fine even if your brain is damaged?" Si Qingyan asked in disbelief. "It won't be damaged." Bei Yunji did not even look up. Si Qingyan looked at her for a while, and knew that it was useless to persuade her, so he simply called in front of Bei Yunj. "Hello, old master? Do you know how high your precious heir's fever is now?" "He's still." Suddenly, Bei Yunj snatched Si Qingyan's phone. "Are you looking for trouble with me?" "Master Pei, you're too irritable now. You're even scarier than the first time I saw you." Hearing this, Bei Yunj's eyes flickered. She returned the phone to him and said lightly, "Sorry." Although Si Qingyan felt that Bei Yunj's temper was definitely not good, it was as if she had taken gunpowder today. Si Qingyan said, "I'll take you to the hospital." Bei Yunj hesitated. "Can't we find a private doctor?" Si Qingyan was speechless. He was really born with a silver spoon in his mouth. At the hospital, Bei Yunj looked at Si Qingyan beside her. "Brother Yan, is the new medicine not ready yet?" Si Qingyan was stunned. "Recently I think I need it." Bei Yunj slowly adjusted his cuffs. Si Qingyan was silent for a moment. "Actually, Dr. Cui has also developed," Bei Yunj thought for a moment. "Brother Yan, if you don't have any new drugs, can you get me some sleeping pills?" Bei Yunj was a typical good-looking person who was easily forgiven for all the bad things she had done. Especially now that she looked sickly, her skin was sickly pale, and her black hair was hanging down softly. Her phoenix eyes, which were usually lazy, were filled with an unruly and aggressive aura when she raised the tip of her tail. But now she was just looking at him quietly. It gave people the illusion that she was obedient, and their hearts softened. Si Qingyan was speechless. Fortunately, this guy never pretended to be obedient and focused on scientific research. He did not engage in relationships. Otherwise, people would seek revenge every day in the institute. End of chapter. Chapter 1023. Si Qingyan rubbed the hair at the back of his head in frustration. "If I give you any medicine, old master will strangle me to death personally." The medicine Bei Yunj used was tested by the higher-ups and confirmed to be safe. However, this was the first time Si Qingyan had seen Bei Yunj's eyes so red, and her lazy expression had a hint of indifference. "Then forget it." Before Bei Yunj could finish speaking, Si Qingyan turned around and left quickly. When he returned, Si Qingyan threw the medicine in his hand into Bei Yunj's arms. "I asked my friend to prescribe it for you. You're not allergic, are you?" Bei Yunj looked at the ingredients and smiled lazily. "No thank you, Brother Yan." Si Qingyan was speechless. All right, he regretted it after doing this. "Don't worry, I'll say that I bought it." Bei Yunj put the medicine back into her pocket. Si Qingyan hesitated. "Try not to eat it." Compared to the old master, he was more afraid that something would really happen to Bei Yunj. In the wee hours of the morning, after tossing and turning, Bei Yunj went downstairs to pour a glass of water. Sitting on the sofa, Bei Yunj subconsciously glanced at her phone and called Huashidu, but she quickly hung up. At this time, the man might be working. However, she did not expect. Bei Yunj was about to get up when her phone suddenly rang. After picking up the call, it was the man's deep and pleasant voice. There was a magnetic smile in his voice, as if he could calm her down. "What's wrong? Can't Yunyan sleep?" Bei Yunj licked her red lips. "I called the wrong number just now. I can't sleep." There was a low chuckle in the man's voice. It was hopelessly sexy. In the quiet night, everything seemed gentle and explicit. "You even bought a gift for Yunyan." "What?" Bei Yunj asked instinctively. Unexpectedly, a video call suddenly popped up on her phone. After the call was connected, Bei Yunj looked at the dim light on the screen. The man's well-defined hand suddenly took out a red headband from the side. For some reason, she had a bad feeling. As expected, when Bei Yunj saw it clearly, she realized that it was a pair of elk antlers. Bei Yunj was speechless. What special fetish did this man have? Huashida glanced at Bei Yunj. The corners of his peach blossom eyes curled up, looking seductive and light. He said naturally, "Brother likes little bunnies too." Bei Yunj looked up and saw the man's slender and clean hand playing with another white cat ear that had appeared out of nowhere. This scene was inexplicably ambiguous and seductive. It made people blush and their hearts beat faster. However, the man was quite regretful. It's a pity that Sung Su couldn't buy it after going to 3 stores. Bei Yunj's Hua Did Sung-soo have any self-awareness as a personal assistant? Pei Yunj rejected him expressionlessly. Doesn't Union like furry things? Of course. The man said this without blushing at all. Pei Yunj. If this thing appeared in someone else's hands, she would find it cute. However, this D*MN man's gaze was obviously wrong. I'm going to sleep. Pei Yunj hung up the phone, afraid that Hoshiru would say something else. The man looked at the young lady on the other end of the video call. Her face was tense, but her ears were red. He could not help but smile. But soon, Hoshiru casually threw the white cat ear in his hand on the table. Go and call Zhong Shenglin and ask when the test for the medicine will be over. P.S. Not long after I got home, I'll continue to update. End of chapter. Chapter 1024. At night, after being disturbed by Hoshida's thoughts, she inexplicably slept much better. The next day, at the Computing Institute, Pei Yunj sent a message to the man. When is brother coming back? Very quickly, there was a reply. Union misses me that much. Pei Yunj. She could almost imagine Hoshida's tone when he said this to her. What are you looking at, Master Pei? Si Qingyan couldn't help asking. Pei Yunj glanced at Hoshiru and instinctively put her phone back into her pocket. Nothing. Si Qingyan held the thermos flask with one hand, and almost thought that he was seeing Pei Yunj in a relationship. However, Pei Yunj's eyes were indeed not so red today. Pei Yunj. She didn't know whether to say that this medicine was effective or that Hoshiru was effective. Si Qingyan suddenly remembered. You just went to get a drip yesterday. Why are you still here today? Did you take medicine yesterday? Si Qingyan asked. Pei Yunj replied, yes. Si Qingyan nodded thoughtfully. The effect is quite good. Back home, Pei Yunj was chatting with Auntie Meow downstairs when she suddenly received a message from the man. Sleep in brother's bedroom today. There's nothing much at home. Seeing that Pei Yunj was in a better state than yesterday, Si Qingyan did not say much and only reminded her to rest well. At 5 in the afternoon, Pei Yunj was chased out of the institute and asked to rest early. Pei Yunj. Couldn't he do something that a human should do? Miss Assistant Sung came over just now, Auntie Meow said. Pei Yunj had yet to send a message to ask. Then she saw another new message. This way, you can dream of brother. Pei Yunj had just gone upstairs when she knew what Sung-soo had done. He had cut off the power in her room. Pei Yunj. Pei Yunj asked without looking up. Is he here to get the documents? Not really. He just stood by our power supply box for a long time. I don't know what he's doing. At night. But after class, Jasmine and Tich's minds were in a mess. Did they just see a man's suit behind the teacher's back? Teacher Pei was cohabiting with someone. It was hard to guess who was behind this. Not long after, Pei Yunj went to the man's bedroom to borrow electricity and taught Jasmine and Tich for 2 hours. After he was done, he prepared to take a shower and sleep. She unconsciously frowned and opened her eyes, but she didn't see anyone in the bedroom. Outside the window, everything was quiet, and the night light was like fireflies. Yin? Pei Yunj, who knew nothing, changed into her pajamas and went to bed. There was a faint fragrance on the bed, which made people feel at ease as usual. In the middle of the night, Pei Yunj felt a little cold on her forehead and subconsciously reached out to take it. Only then did she realize that it was a cooling patch. She didn't know when the man had appeared in front of her. His usually lazy peach blossom eyes were now staring straight at her. Hoshidu was about to reach out and tidy up the cooling stickers that Pei Yunj had crooked. However, Pei Yunj suddenly grabbed his hand. The man's deep and familiar voice fell into her ears. She looked up. The man lowered his head in surprise, not wanting to meet the girl's direct gaze. This child had a fever and was confused, but she had become much bolder. Hoshidu curled his lips and patiently allowed her to hold his hand. His other hand slowly tidied up her cooling stickers. You can't even take care of yourself after being away for 2 weeks? Hoshidu had just finished speaking when Pei Yunj suddenly called out, Brother. Chapter 1025. The man sat by the bed. Not long after he got off the plane, he rushed home. At first, he thought that the little girl could not sleep because he was not around. But he did not expect her to be sick. Are you feeling unwell? Huashidu sent a message to the private doctor and allowed the little girl to hold his hand. He said, after sweating, you won't feel uncomfortable anymore. However, Huashidu did not know that Bei Yunj did not hear a single word he said. At this moment, Bei Yunj looked at him for a long time before saying, "Come here." Huashidu raised his eyebrows and looked at the little girl on the bed. There was a hint of playfulness in his nonchalant eyes. He put down his phone and listened to her. He sat closer. However, the little girl lying on the bed was still staring at him with dissatisfaction in her eyes. The man bent down with interest. His low and hoarse laughter was seductive. Are you confused because you're sick, Yunyan? Bei Yunj's eyes flickered. Then, before the man could react, Bei Yunj suddenly reached out and wrapped her slender and fair arms around the man's neck. Huashidu was hooked by this sudden hug and leaned over instinctively. However, he quickly supported himself with one hand on the edge of the bed. He was afraid that he would hurt the culprit. Yunyan. The man's voice was low and hoarse, and his sexy Adam's apple bobbed. But then Bei Yunj, who had her hands around Huashida's neck, gradually looked down. She stared at the mole on the man's Adam's apple. Suddenly, the man had yet to speak. Bei Yunj suddenly leaned closer, hooked her arms around the man's neck, and kissed the mole on his Adam's apple. The man also felt a soft and warm layer on his Adam's apple. His body froze, and an unknown evil fire suddenly rose in his lower abdomen. Do I have to take the initiative even in my dreams, brother? Bei Yunj did not notice the darkness in the man's eyes. Her beautiful eyes curved lazily, and she felt that she had completed a major event in her life. She finally kissed the mole on Huashida's Adam's apple. Although it was a dream, Huashidu was so angry that he laughed. In a dream, Bei Yunj, who was originally a little dizzy, saw Huashida's dangerous gaze clearly. This dream was a little realistic. What else do you want? The lazy and noble man suddenly laughed and asked her while raising the temperature in the room. Tell me about it. Before Bei Yunj could regain her senses, she saw Huashidu throw the remote control away and suddenly take off his coat and suit jacket. Bei Yunj. She didn't think about that. Bei Yunj watched as the man pulled off his tie with one hand and silently pulled the blanket up. I still want to sleep. Not long after, Bei Yunj was scooped up and leaned against the cushion behind her. They looked up and met each other's eyes. The man's eyes were dark and his magnetic voice was lazy and playful as he asked, Isn't it too much of a loss for you to only kiss me once in your dream, Yunyan? Bei Yunj's gaze fell on the place she had just kissed. Because it was her first time doing it, the kiss ended very quickly. Bei Yunj's heart started to itch again. However, when Bei Yunj looked up at Huashidu again, she quickly dismissed this thought. The man in front of her had a dark gaze. It was dangerous and aggressive, as if he could swallow her at any time. She didn't know why. Bei Yunj's mind was in a mess, but she had a premonition. If she really dared to act recklessly, this person would really punish her on the spot. End of this chapter. Chapter 1026. Bei Yunj. Wasn't this dream too dangerous? Brother. Just as Bei Yunj's thoughts were running wild, she suddenly seemed to hear movement at the door. Bei Yunj subconsciously looked at the door. Seeing that the young lady dared to be distracted in front of him, the man who had always been casual licked his itchy teeth. The next moment, Bei Yunj had just turned around when she was suddenly pressed against the cushion. She was surrounded by the man's strong aggressive aura. She looked up and met the man's explicit and burning gaze. This dream was too wild. It was precisely because of this that Bei Yunj did not suspect that this was not a dream. Normally, with the man's usual style, it was impossible for him to do these things to her. Suddenly, Bei Yunj sucked in a breath of cold air. The man bit her neck with a moderate amount of force. It was numb but not painful. However, the atmosphere was so ambiguous that it made her cheeks burn. Don't. Bei Yunj was about to push him away and subconsciously avoided the man's aggressive aggression. However, in the next moment, the man covered the back of her head with one hand and gently stroked her long black hair. In fact, he did not allow her to retreat. The man easily eased her uneasiness, but he also led this dangerous situation that made her blush and her heart race. Outside the door, it was Jiang Baichuan, whom he had met at the private clinic last time. When Huashidu came out again, Jiang Baichuan sized up the man in front of him. He was no different from usual. "Where's your family?" Jiang Baichuan asked. Huashidu lit a cigarette and casually leaned against the door. "Inside." Jiang Baichuan. He remembered that Huashidu's family member was only in high school, right? Huashidu was smoking in front of him. Then, when Jiang Baichuan walked in, the girl was dressed neatly except for an obvious bite mark on her neck. Huashidu also had times when he was not human. Jiang Baichuan looked at Huashidu with a complicated expression. "I asked you to come and see a doctor, not to stand there foolishly." The man's voice sounded indifferently. Jiang Baichuan didn't dare to say much. He just quietly checked Bei Yunji's temperature and asked fearlessly, "Is it really just a fever? No other treatment needs?" There were also people in the circle who would often treat certain injuries caused by excessive indulgence in certain aspects for the lovers of the rich. Next, when Jiang Baichuan met Huashidu's gaze, he immediately shut his mouth. "Get some ointment for your neck," Huashidu said slowly. Jiang Baichuan said subconsciously, "The one on your neck will disappear in 2 or 3 days." Huashidu turned to look at him. "Yes, Master Du." Jiang Baichuan was very polite. "Continent K. What's the situation with Master Du? Where did he go? Why are you here to see me?" The man was wearing a white coat. His features were handsome and elegant, and his temperament was cold. "Zhou Yu said, Dr. Song, Master Du has returned to country A these few days, but he will be here soon." Song Su laughed. "Since when is there someone in country A who can make Master Du so happy that he forgets about home?" Zhou Yu was silent for a moment. "Master Du, this time, I brought her to see you." "What? He wants to bring a woman to see Continent K?" Song Su frowned, his tone filled with dissatisfaction. The next day, Bei Yunji woke up and felt that her hand hurt a little. She opened her eyes and saw that it seemed to have been injected with saline last night. After Bei Yunji went downstairs, she saw Huashidu reading the newspaper. "Brother?" A memory suddenly appeared in Bei Yunji's mind. The end of this chapter. Chapter 1027. Last night, she seemed to have had a very unruly dream. Bei Yunji thought of the scene where the man turned the tables, and her legs almost went weak. "Let's go downstairs and eat." The man's expression was natural, as if nothing had happened. "Brother, did you come back last night?" Bei Yunji probed. The man sat at the dining table and replied lightly, "Yes." Such a normal reaction made Bei Yunji feel that what happened last night was just a dream. "What's wrong?" Huashidu looked up at her. "Bei Yunji. Then did you greet me last night?" The man's hand that was holding his chopsticks stopped, and he suddenly smiled. "Yunyun dreamed of me last night?" Bei Yunji. This rhetorical question made Bei Yunji speechless. "Last night, I went in to see you." Before Bei Yunji could ask again, the man continued, "You've been running a high fever, so I asked the doctor to give you an 4 drip." Bei Yunji. "That's it. Did Yunyun do something to me in the dream?" The man's thin red lips curled up as he asked with interest. Bei Yunji. She could not believe that she could be so useless in her dream. After being bitten on the neck by the D*MN man, she begged for mercy. What was even more unexpected was that the Huashidu in her dream could be so terrible and do things that made her blush. Yunyun. A person's dream reflects their personal preferences to a certain extent. However, the man still smiled slowly. Bei Yunji. "I'm hungry." After breakfast, Bei Yunji went upstairs and looked at herself in the mirror doubtfully. In the end, there was no mark on the back of her neck. Bei Yunji pondered and slowly went downstairs. Suddenly, "Miss Pei, let me take your temperature." Bei Yunji looked up and saw Jiang Baichuan. She nodded and replied, "Okay, thank you." Jiang Baichuan also secretly glanced at Bei Yunji. From time to time, she touched the spot where she was bitten last night. He looked rather puzzled. Obviously, he didn't know what had happened last night. Jiang Baichuan couldn't help but glance at the elegant man beside him. He was truly a refined scum. This was also the first time Jiang Baichuan realized that this young man could actually lie to a young lady without blushing at all. "Dr. Jiang?" Bei Yunji's voice interrupted Jiang Baichuan's thoughts. Let's take Miss Pei's temperature first. After regaining his senses, Jiang Baichuan immediately opened the medical box. Until Jiang Baichuan left, Huashida suddenly said, Yunyan, I'm going out of the country in 2 days. Do you want to go with me? Bei Yunj didn't have much to do in the station. He just needed to report to Zhong Shenglin. Sure. Bei Yunj did not look up at Huashidu either. However, when she thought of the dream last night, her ears inexplicably heated up. Why would she have such a dream? The man only curled his lips and didn't say much. The next day, Bei Yunj had just arrived at the Computing Institute when Zhong Shenglin handed a bottle of new medicine to Bei Yunj. This bottle has just been tested. For now, this new medicine should be the most compatible with you. Bei Yunj smiled. Thank you, Elder Zhong. Zhong Shenglin couldn't help but mutter in his heart as he drank water. There was no need to thank him. If it wasn't for the person beside her, who would be able to invite Wuxia to make medicine. Suddenly, oh right, I'm going to Continent K the day after tomorrow. Zhong Shenglin choked. Cough cough, where are you going? P.S. Dr. Luo's name has been edited. It's easy to get mixed up. End of this chapter. Chapter 1028. Nance had long said that someone in Continent K was targeting Gu. Now had Gur been discovered? My brother seems to be doing something in Continent K. Bei Yunj's beautiful eyes curved as she lazily rested her chin on her hand. Zhong Shenglin was silent for a moment before probing. Mr. Hua. Yes. Si Qingyan was speechless. So Huashidu was back. No wonder he was in such a good mood today. That's good. Zhong Shenglin heaved a sigh of relief. If it was Huashidu, then there would be no danger in going to Continent K. But Gur, I know some people in Continent K. If you want to visit the school or the laboratory. I only plan to play for a few days. Zhong Shenglin's smile froze. All right then. It was harder than ascending to the heavens for his Gu, to open up more interpersonal relationships. That day, Huashidu took a private plane to Continent K. After arriving at Continent K, Seng Su brought Bei Yunj back to Huashida's private manor. Huashidu went to settle some matters. The population density of Continent K was much lower than that of Yincheng, but the buildings they encountered on the way showed the prosperity of this continent. Continent K is more special, and the difference in regional jurisdiction is also huge. This area is usually crowded at night, and there is no domestic security. Seng Su reminded her. In Seng Su's opinion, a pampered young lady like Bei Yunj was indeed not suitable to come to a place like Continent K. You must bring bodyguards with you when you go out. Seng Su could not help but remind her again. Got it. Bei Yunj replied lazily. Private manor. Bei Yunj had just gone upstairs. After looking at her room, she was about to go downstairs for some tea. However, she did not expect to hear someone talking about her. What kind of bewitching potion has Huashidu been drugged with? Is a woman worth his attention? He really brought her to the manor? Bei Yunj pondered. The woman that the person downstairs was talking about should be her. Dr. Luo. Seng Su hurriedly wanted to stop him. However, Luo Xie sneered. I want to see what kind of fairy he has with him. After saying this, Luo Xie hadn't walked up yet when he suddenly looked up and saw the lazy girl upstairs. Black hair, red dress, snow-white skin, a slender waist, and beautiful eyes that made people not dare to look straight at her. She didn't look like a celestial immortal. Instead, she looked more like a demoness who could bring disaster to countries and people. Are you the woman beside Huashidu? Luo Xie regained his senses, and asked in an unfriendly tone. Seng Su had already figured out Bei Yunj's temper. He didn't dare to watch what was about to happen. As expected, Bei Yunj glanced at him and went downstairs. Assistant Seng, I'm going to take a nap later. His meaning was obvious. He wanted Seng Su to get him out of here. Luo Xie's handsome face was about to change in anger. Wasn't the woman beside Huashidu too arrogant? However, when Seng Su heard that, he really turned to look at him and said sincerely, Dr. Luo, Master Du will probably be back at night. Why don't you go back first? Miss Pei does have the habit of taking afternoon naps. Luo Xie's expression was about to collapse. He didn't expect even Seng Su to listen to her so much. She's taking an afternoon nap. Can't I sit here? Luoxia gave a fake smile. Sung-soo was serious. Miss Pei was sick 2 days ago and needs to rest. What illness? Fever. Luoxia had studied medicine for so many years, but this was the first time he knew that she needed to rest to reduce a fever. End of chapter. Chapter 1029. Bei Yunj went downstairs to get a plate of fruits. Before she went upstairs, she asked Sung-soo to help her bring the laptop upstairs. Luoxia looked at this situation. It was obvious that Sung-soo had already treated Bei Yunj as Huashida's subordinate. Therefore, when Huashida was not around, Sung-soo only listened to Bei Yunj. Sung-soo had just sent Bei Yunj's precious laptop upstairs. When he went downstairs, he was stopped by Luoxia. Assistant Sung, what is she studying? Luoxia guessed that Bei Yunj should also be a university student. Oh, my Miss Pei is still a third-year high school student. She just took a leave of absence. Sung-soo smiled nonchalantly. Luoxia could not believe it. She's still a high school student? Sung-soo immediately explained, afraid that Luoxia would misunderstand Huashidu. Miss Pei is already an adult. She just repeated a grade previously. She still dares to take a leave of absence after repeating a grade? Luoxia sneered, his eyes full of disdain. He had already treated Bei Yunj as a scheming woman who wanted to cling on to Huashidu. Don't you think that this woman is very scheming? Luoxia still wanted to remind Sung-soo. However, he did not expect Sung-soo to nod desperately in agreement and anger. I have indeed never seen a woman more terrifying than Miss Pei. It was only because he had secretly reported to Master Du in the district last time. Miss Pei had held a grudge for half a month. Every time she went to the Hua Corporation, she would bring a deck of cards and win all of his year-end bonus. Then do you still think that this woman is compatible with Huashidu? Luoxia frowned. Sung-soo was stunned. If Master Du thinks they are compatible, then they are. Luoxia's expression was about to crack. An idea flashed in Sung-soo's mind. He suddenly grabbed Luoxia's arm sneakily. Dr. Luo, can you do me a favor? My year-end bonus is in Miss Pei's hands. Luoxia looked at him sideways and gestured for him to continue. Miss Pei said that as long as I finish her homework, she will return it to me. But mathematics is too difficult. I don't dare to blindly do Miss Pei's homework. Can you do me a favor? Although Sung-soo graduated from a famous university, the difficulty of mathematics questions these days were already different from that of his time. When Luoxia heard this, his face darkened. He immediately called Huashidu. Soon, the man's pleasant voice sounded. What's the matter? Master Du, the high school girl beside you even asked your assistant to do her homework. Luoxia wanted to tell Huashidu that Bei Yunj was arrogant, because she was pampered. But in the next moment, Huashidu asked unhurriedly, has Sung-soo finished writing? Luoxia. What the hell? Sung-soo's math is not very good. Let Sung-soo leave his math homework to Zhou. Huashida looked at the documents and said slowly, Hongda is quite strict with the quality of the student's homework. Zhou's body trembled. Has the boss become so crazy? He was a high-end talent with a double major in mathematics and finance from Neely University, yet he still had to do high school homework. At this moment, the most unbelievable one was Luoxia. Huashidu was clearly a person who was self-abiding, polite, and indifferent. It was almost impossible to see him favoring anyone. But now, Huashidu had completely lost his bottom line for a woman. Master Du, are you serious? Luoxia could not help but ask. In 2 days, she will be doing a checkup in your studio. I hope you can do your best and not make any mistakes. Chapter 1030. Me. Before Luoxia could say anything, the other party hung up. Not long after, Luoxia left with a dark expression. Back in the laboratory, a little fatty smiled and said, Boss, you're back. Did you see the forum? I'm not free. Luoxia's expression was ugly. The little fatty knew that his boss was not satisfied with the woman beside Master Du this time. His boss came back with a dark expression. Something must have happened. He leaned forward sneakily. Boss, the forum said that the Computing Institute won the International Computing Competition. The Computing Institute. Luo Xia's face darkened even more and his gaze was as sharp as a blade. Zheng Kaikai, this is the first time I've realized that you're not afraid of death. The little fatty trembled and immediately explained. No, boss, listen to me. All the semifinals will be included in this international competition. The little fatty hinted crazily. Also, only members under the age of 35 are allowed to participate in the competition. Other than Si Qingyan, who else is under the age of 35 in the Computing Institute? You know. Luo Xia was stunned. You're talking about? That's right. Boss, haven't you liked her for a long time? The little fatty continued to smile obsequiously. How is it, boss? Are you happy? Where is the semifinals? Luo Xia took a deep breath. The gloominess from before had completely disappeared. What could make a withered tree come back to life more than the power of an idol? I heard that it's either Continent K or Country J, the little fatty said. However, rumor has it that although she's quite young, some people say that she's already 35. The little fatty wanted to say something but hesitated. Boss, you're only 27. Do I need you to teach me what kind of woman I like? Luo Xia looked at him coldly. The little fatty was speechless. After all, Luo Xia was the target of countless female researchers in the industry. He didn't know what was wrong with him, but he suddenly liked that person who had never shown her face. He even had to say that he had a very special feeling for her. But who in the industry didn't feel that she was special? This was a super genius who had appeared out of nowhere and won 2 major awards in the world. However, everyone knew that she was an idol. She could only be seen from afar and not blasphemed. Only Luo Xia kept thinking that he could become a successful man behind the scenes. Little Fatty's mood was complicated. Boss, actually, I think you're just... Luo Xia suddenly interrupted. You stay in the lab. I'm going out to buy some suits. Little Fatty. Hopefully she wasn't pregnant and wasn't ugly. Otherwise he would be letting down his boss's yearning for love. The next day, in the bedroom, the person who was too lazy to move asked while biting a cherry lazily. Little Greg, when can you feed me cherries? The laptop on the bed that was forced to chat with him automatically turned black. The Gemini system, which had yet to be installed into the robot's body, had learned one of the greatest human skills in the past few days, playing dead. Although it was shameful, it was very useful. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Miss Pei? It was Tseng Su's voice. Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows and went to open the door. What's wrong? Dr. Luo said that there will be a lecture by a famous computer professor in the K-Continent Academy. You should go and take a look. Tseng Su remembered that Bei Yunj was very interested in this aspect. There were talents everywhere in the K-Continent Academy. If Miss Pei could make a few friends during this trip, she would definitely benefit. End of chapter. Chapter 1031. Bei Yunj did not say a word. She only smiled politely at Tseng Su and prepared to close the door. Wait! Tseng Su immediately blocked the door. Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows, but there was no smile in her eyes. Is there anything else? Tseng Su's scalp went numb for some reason, and he said pitifully, Miss Pei, since you've come to Continent K, you should at least walk around. What if Master Du thinks that I'm deliberately not letting you out? Tseng Su was originally worried that Bei Yunj would be unsafe if she wandered around. However, he did not expect Bei Yunj to be so homebody. Continent K Academy. Bei Yunj chewed on a candy and sat in the back seat without saying a word. Her aura was filled with impatience. Miss Pei were here. Tseng Su was excited. Actually, Tseng Su had never been to Continent K Academy, but he knew that it was a top academy. Although it did not participate in the international rankings, its reputation was still not inferior to Neely University. Tseng Su had wanted to go to K University in the past, but unfortunately, K University was very strict with its students. Miss Pei, aren't you excited? This is a top academy. Tseng Su chattered along the way. Bei Yunj answered perfunctorily. However, she did not expect someone to suddenly call her on the way. Miss Pei? Bei Yunj turned around and recognized Luo Xia. Dr. Luo, long time no see. Bei Yunj glanced at him and left after politely brushing him off. Tseng Su was stunned by this scene. Miss Pei really didn't play by the rules as usual. She was so cold and perfunctory that no one could find fault with her. Luocia's face darkened as he blocked Bei Yunj. Miss Pei's way of greeting is really special. Where are you going? Sang Su immediately said. I'm taking Miss Pei to a computer lecture. Computer lecture? Suddenly, a female voice sounded. It was the woman standing beside Luoxia. That should be my lecture, right? Lai Yinqing smiled. Lai Yinqing was 28 years old, the youngest associate professor in Continent K, and also the deputy director of the 10,000 Computing Institute. Are you Professor Lai? Sung Su was also very surprised that Lai Yinqing would be so young and beautiful. He was a bit incoherent. You are really young and beautiful, and also very powerful. Bei Yunj glanced at Sung Su and knew that she wouldn't be able to leave anytime soon. Lai Yinqing glanced at Bei Yunj and smiled gracefully. It seems that this gentleman is more interested in my studies than this lady. Our miss is still young, so we're just bringing her here for a tour. Sung Su nodded his head like he was pecking at rice. He looked at Lai Yunqing as if he was looking at his idol. Lai Yunqing raised her eyebrows and said thoughtfully, Yes, but I've already finished college when I was 20. Sung Su didn't notice anything wrong and just chatted with Lai Yunqing. Luoxia looked at Bei Yunj and suddenly asked, Since Miss Pei is interested in computers, why don't you sit in on the class at K Continent Academy? Sung Su looked like a parent from Bei Yunj. His eyes lit up as he asked excitedly, Really? Bei Yunj was speechless. This. Lai Yunqing's smile froze. She looked at Luoxia, not understanding what he meant. Luoxia glanced at Lai Yunqing. He didn't intend to tell Lai Yunqing that Bei Yunj was brought here by Huashidu. In Continent K and Country R, Huashidu usually only brought Zhouyu with him, so no one recognized Sang Su. Luoxia seemed to have thought of something and chuckled. Consider it as giving me face. End of chapter. Chapter 1032. Lai Yunqing's eyes flashed and she regained her smile. Since you say so, I can only agree. Her tone was relaxed. However, if Miss Pei performs well, I can also write a recommendation letter for you. In the future, better universities will still give me some face. Hearing this, Bei Yunj glanced at Lai Yunqing leisurely. Her beautiful eyes seemed to be able to see through all her thoughts. Bei Yunj sneered indifferently. Sung Su was speechless. It was not harmful, but it was extremely insulting. Indeed. Bei Yunj did not say a word, but Lai Yunqing's expression did not look too good. Assistant Sung, my patience is limited. Bei Yunj turned to look at Sung Su. There was a hint of coldness in her beautiful eyes. Sung Su was speechless. Looking at this scene, Luoxia did not expect Sung Su to be afraid of Bei Yunj. Miss Pei, people can't rely on others all their lives. Isn't it a good thing to work hard for yourself? Luoxia asked in an unpleasant tone. He did not understand why Huashidu would fall for such a woman. Dr. Luo. Bei Yunj smiled lazily. Her tone was gentle, but her bright eyes were wild and arrogant. I'm not working hard. I'm leaving some space for others to show off. These words made Luoxia's handsome face sink. He did not understand why Bei Yunj dared to say such things. Lai Yunqing glanced at Luoxia and smiled. Is that so? It seems that Miss Pei must have some outstanding points. Why don't you show it to everyone? Hearing this, Bei Yunj looked at Lai Yunqing with interest. Only animals in heat will constantly show off their advantages. Sung Su was speechless. Luoxia was speechless. Lai Yunqing's face turned green. Fortunately, not long after, someone urged Lai Yunqing to attend the lecture. In the end, they could only leave on bad terms. At the lecture, in the last row, Sung Su also understood this matter. It was not practical for Bei Yunj to make friends, but it was much easier to make enemies. Miss Pei, do you have any friends? Sung Su asked tentatively. Lai Yunqing was such a mature and gentle woman, and she was also a super god. She had enthusiastically said that she wanted to write a recommendation letter for Bei Yunj, but Bei Yunj was unmoved. Bei Yunj's hand froze in the middle of writing the report. However, just as Bei Yunj looked up and was about to speak, Lai Yunqing suddenly said from the stage, This time, I see that many of you have brought a computer. Let me teach you a little trick to warm up. Lai Yunqing looked at everyone and smiled. Everyone should be interested in deciphering the computer, right? When the students below the stage heard this, they began to discuss excitedly. Professor Lai, is it difficult to decipher a computer? Generally, those with strong computer skills would be able to decipher computers. However, the students in the audience were all freshmen, so it was inevitable that they were curious. It's not that difficult. Lai Yunqing smiled gently. Currently, the best computer defense system is a new product developed by the Higgins Group. Last month, I went to their research team to observe. They are indeed very impressive. The students below the stage started to jeer. Then the professor will definitely be able to crack it. As long as it is a system made by humans, it is not invulnerable, Lai Yunqing said confidently. Then, she raised her voice and asked, "Then which student is willing to lend me a computer, so that I can give everyone a demonstration?" The female student in the last row? Everyone turned their heads, and their eyes fell on Bei Yunj. P.S. Continue tonight. Thank you for your monthly tickets. End of chapter. Chapter 1033. Bei Yunj saved the report, and looked at her unhurriedly. Bei Yunj felt Lai Yunqing's gaze lingering on her for a long time. It seemed to have something to do with Wuxia. Don't worry, I won't destroy your computer. I'm just giving everyone a demonstration. Lai Yunqing smiled and said, "If it's damaged, I'll pay you 3 times the amount. You don't mind, right?" Everyone looked at Professor Lai, with eyes full of admiration. After all, she was an associate professor at Continent K's Academy at the age of 28. Sung Su's expression froze when he heard this. Bei Yunj wasn't a kind person. How could she be expected to do good deeds? However, out of his expectation, Bei Yunj chuckled and said leisurely, "I don't mind. I can't stop you from invading the system." Sung Su was speechless. He didn't know why, but he felt that Miss Pei's gentle demeanor made her seem like a bad person. "But Professor Lai, are you sure you want to choose my computer? It doesn't have a good temper." Bei Yunj looked at the computer on her lap thoughtfully. Bei Yunj had been working on the program for a week in order to design the most accurate robot system. Although she had experience with the basic program in her previous life, Bei Yunj had been improving the system from time to time in order to achieve a high level of precision. Sung Su felt that Bei Yunj's words were a little strange, but he couldn't tell why. Lai Yunqing thought that Bei Yunj was deliberately mystifying things and smiled. "Since you don't mind, Miss Pei can bring it up." Bei Yunj let Sung Su bring her to the stage. Sung Su was well versed in the ways of the world. In order to prevent unnecessary accidents, Sung Su stayed by Bei Yunj's computer. This was Miss Pei's computer. If anything went wrong, Sung Su was afraid that Bei Yunj would smash the entire lecture hall. At this moment, Bei Yunj was sitting in the last row. She was bored to death as she scrolled through the group chat of the research institute. She saw a few research institutes gossiping. They said that Continent K's computer scientists were gathering. Something might have happened. Bei Yunj glanced at it, and continued to read the documents. On the stage, Lai Yunqing saw Wuxia in the first row and his gaze swept across the last row. His gaze sank. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling that Wuxia's attitude towards Bei Yunj was a little strange. As a result, she was targeting a junior for no reason. If it was in the past, she would also laugh at her own behavior. But now she couldn't wait any longer. Lai Yunqing's eyes flashed, then she switched the projection screen to her computer. He wanted to show everyone how he operated it. However, when Lai Yunqing saw the HG logo on Bei Yunj's computer, she frowned. Higgins. However, she remembered that Higgins' latest product didn't include this computer. Even the top-notch configuration sold in auctions was not of this design. A hint of mockery appeared in Lai Yunqing's eyes. "Students, the computer system configuration is different, so the difficulty of our hacking will also be different. For example, it would take an expert hacker more than 7 hours to hack into a top-notch computer product of a large enterprise. As for the average random brand, it can be dealt with in 10 minutes. Lai Yunqing started to operate the computer and smiled elegantly. With the configuration of this student's computer, it can be hacked in about 10 minutes. She was saying that Bei Yunji's computer was a random brand. End of chapter. Chapter 1034. When Lai Yunqing said this, she did not notice that the red light on the computer beside her had flashed twice. Sung Su heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Bei Yunji, who was in the last row, did not seem angry. But then, after Lai Yunqing invaded for a few minutes, the confident smile on her face froze. What was going on? She could have succeeded just now. Why couldn't she attack? Lai Yunqing's expression did not change, but her hands sped up. Everyone could see the code appearing crazily on the screen. However, 10 minutes had passed, and Professor Lai still had not attacked this inferior computer. Suddenly, everyone heard the crisp sound of a mechanical system. Undesirable intrusion detected. Please activate the following mode. At the same time, not far away, a few options popped up on Bei Yunji's cell phone. A. Automatic lock tracking mode. B. Anti-intrusion mode. C. Automatic alarm mode. D. Automatic processing mode. Bei Yunji casually clicked A. Then under everyone's horrified gazes, little G's mechanical voice continued to enter their ears. Okay, automatic processing mode has been selected. Bei Yunji, who had stopped reading the documents, did not understand little G's rebellion. Bei Yunji suddenly remembered that back then, Si Qingyan had complained that this system was not enough for Bei Yunji, and had taken the initiative to help personalize the system. But now Bei Yunji had a strong feeling. Although the robot system had a mandatory ban that could stop all system orders. However, once such a ban was issued, the system would return to its factory settings. In other words, everything would be reset. Bei Yunji thought about it, and only planned to watch the show. At the same time, she wanted to understand what Si Qingyan thought of her. The others did not expect to see an artificial intelligence and a computer science professor fight today. Just as Bei Yunji's order was issued, everyone suddenly saw Bei Yunji's computer screen light up, and a series of codes appeared. Then on the big screen, Lai Yunqing's computer screen suddenly turned black. Lai Yunqing's expression changed. What? Her computer had been counterlocked. The students below the stage pointed and discussed. They could not believe that this inferior computer could lock Lai Yunqing's computer, without anyone controlling it. However, the lecture was still going on. Lai Yunqing had no choice but to calm down. She bit her lip, looked at Wuxia below the stage, and continued to control of the computer. A few minutes later, Lai Yunqing's computer suddenly returned to normal. Lai Yunqing heaved a sigh of relief, and prepared for the next round of hacking to save face. When Wuxia saw this scene, he could not help but turn to look at the last row. He only saw Bei Yunji watching with interest, as if she was not worried at all. Just as expected. Suddenly, when the students and professors in the audience saw what happened next, they were so shocked that they were boiling with excitement. Following Lai Yunqing's computer screen, lines of text appeared on the big screen, revealing little Greg's strong resentment. You're the inferior's computer. Your whole family is made of inferior computers. Everyone. This computer must have become a spirit. Bei Yunji. She shouldn't have installed those 27 miniature pinhole cameras. Soon, Lai Yunqing, whose face was pale, received a series of bullying warnings from little G. Is your system very powerful? Everyone. Question mark. Soon. Lai Yunqing's computer suddenly turned blue. End of chapter. Chapter 1035. Is your CPU very powerful? As soon as little G's mechanical voice fell, everyone saw that Lai Yunqing's computer had completely collapsed. Everyone was dumbfounded. Is your heat dissipation very good? Then, everyone saw that the code on the computer that no one was controlling was flying faster. Soon, Lai Yunqing's computer started to smoke and the entire computer was paralyzed. Lai Yunqing's face was ashen. She could only stand rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do with the artificial intelligence's counterattack. Bei Yunji. Fortunately, the system had not been installed in the robot. Otherwise, Bei Yunji did not doubt that this little thing would take a hammer and smash Lai Yunqing's computer. However, then little G's behavior was still very erratic. It was unknown which of the 27 cameras was recording Lai Yunqing's dark face. Suddenly, Lai Yunqing's face appeared on the projection screen. Little G's crisp and tender mechanical voice sounded as expected. Excuse me, do you think you're very strong? As soon as she finished speaking, there were a few professors and students with laptops in their hands. Their laptops were coldly turned on the sound effects. The same mechanical voice sounded one after another. Excuse me, do you think you're very strong? Excuse me, do you think you're very strong? At first, it was only the laptops on the field, but then it was the phones in everyone's pockets. It was still not very harmful, but it was extremely humiliating. Lai Yunqing's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and her entire body was trembling. The others felt their scalps go numb. This artificial intelligence had become a demon. Sung Su was also terrified. He instinctively stayed away from this computer that had become a demon. Miss Pei was not to be trifled with, and neither was Miss Pei's computer. Bei Yunj felt that something was wrong. Her eyebrows twitched, and she stood up in time to walk to the podium. Little G stopped the command. As soon as Bei Yunj's voice was recognized, Little G suddenly became obedient. Roger that, Master. Moi, Master, Bei Yunj. What did Si Qingyan mean by this setting? At this moment, everyone else's computers and phones returned to normal, as if it was just a dream. However, everyone broke out in a cold sweat. They knew that the scene just now was real. Bei Yunj turned to look at Lai Yunqing's broken computer and raised her eyebrows. I'm sorry. I told you that it has a bad temper. I'll pay you back 3 times the price. Everyone. This was indeed the first time they had encountered a bad-tempered computer. Wasn't this computer too awesome? Just one word of inferior brand, and the computer crashed on the spot? What kind of computer is this? Lai Yunqing didn't look too good, but she still asked expressionlessly. One could faintly hear the unwillingness in his voice. Professor Lai doesn't understand AI either? Bei Yunj asked with interest. Artificial intelligence? Lai Yunqing's tone was filled with disbelief. She had never thought that AI would have developed to this extent. Assistant Sung, the lecture is almost over. Bei Yunj glanced at his watch and said to Tsing Su. When Sung Su heard this, he walked over to Bei Yunj's computer and touched it tentatively. He didn't dare to hug it. Miss Pei, is it in a good mood now? Bei Yunj. After leaving, the people in the lecture hall were in an uproar. It's amazing. That computer is too cool. Even Professor Lai can't handle it. Is artificial intelligence so powerful? Then one day, will these things really replace us? P.S. Si Qingyan said that Little G was modified according to Master Pei's personality. Does Little G's attitude towards Master Pei look like Master Pei's attitude towards everyone? Think carefully. She scrolled through the comments and saw someone saying that Master Pei was not doing her job. Master Du had too many scenes? The second person didn't respond. I think it's alright. If they felt that Master Du had too many scenes, they could skip it or give up on the article. Firstly, Master Pei had been doing her research. However, in terms of settings, Master Pei was already at the maximum level, although she did have a huge breakthrough in the later stages. If one went further up the peak of scientific research, it would inevitably be sci-fi. After all, hundreds of years ago, not many people would have imagined the information age and smart homes. These were all the results of scientific researchers. Hence, in the later stages, Master Pei's research career would involve some sci-fi elements, but not much. End of chapter. Chapter 1036. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Look, even Professor Lai lost to this computer. Many students were talking about it, making Lai Yunqing's face turn pale. On the way, Sung Su sighed. Miss Pei, your computer is so similar to your temper. Bei Yunj was speechless. Suddenly, Bei Yunj was about to get into the car when Sung Su carefully held the computer in his arms, and a mechanical voice sounded. Bad intrusion detected. Target intercepted. Bei Yunj's eyes flickered. If it was a normal intrusion, Little G would ask her how to deal with it. Only when it was a dangerous intrusion would Little G automatically intercept the intrusion. Sung Su was so frightened by Little G's sudden voice that his hands almost trembled. Bei Yunj's voice was cold. Find out the reason. As soon as she finished speaking, Pei Yunj placed the laptop on the short table in the car. Soon she saw the data that little G had analyzed automatically. Successfully tracked the IP address data. The range is Ichenli Castle. The intruder is an intruder. There are 7 intruders from the same organization. The area Bei Yunj was in was Ichenli Castle. It was a place where top research universities gathered. The organization behind the attack on such an area probably had an ulterior motive. Miss Pei, what's going on? Sung Su was stunned. He had a feeling that Miss Pei was more powerful than he had imagined. Where's Luoxia? Call Luoxia or Lai Yinqing over. After Bei Yunj finished speaking, Sung Su hurriedly ran off to call them. At this moment, Bei Yunj called Zhong Shenglin. Hello Gu. How's Continent K? Are you having fun? Zhong Shenglin asked with a smile. Old master, someone is infiltrating Ichenli Castle in Continent K. Has the Academy of Continent K done any major research recently? Zhong Shenglin's smile froze when he heard Bei Yunj's question. What? How did you know? I was wandering around the Academy of Continent K, and they targeted me. Bei Yunj said slowly. She had seen similar things in her previous life. Most people might find it unbelievable, but Bei Yunj knew very well that every major research by researchers would attract attention and danger from all over the world. Zhong Shenglin did not expect Bei Yunj to be involved in such a thing. He massaged the space between his eyebrows. I heard that the investigation in Continent K has been very strict recently. It seems like something is going to happen. They're still gathering top computational technology researchers to prepare for a meeting. Nothing in the industry could be hidden from them, who had been in the industry for decades. It was just that there were some things that everyone was used to turning a blind eye to for peace and quiet. Gu, or you're not planning to interfere in this matter, are you? Zhong Shenglin was somewhat worried. Old master, if their major research is about genetic data, microbial experiments and so on. Are you really going to let me go? Bei Yunj asked with great interest. Zhong Shenglin was speechless. Bei Yunj seemed to be an indifferent person. But ever since Meng Liang held her hand and entered the laboratory in her previous life, Bei Yunj understood the responsibility of a researcher better than anyone else. Most of the panic in the world came from battles. And the most fatal battle of all mankind might just be a single genetic data leak. Not long after, Zhong Shenglin called and confirmed that a professor in the Academy of Continent K had made a major breakthrough in genetics. Bei Yunj's eyes darkened. She closed the car door and typed on the keyboard. End of chapter. Chapter 1037. Not long after, Bei Yunj entered the K Continent Academy's website. Old master, does the K Continent Academy have any security alarms? Bei Yunj asked. Zhong Shenglin was stunned. You went in just like that. To be honest, even he felt his scalp go numb when he heard Bei Yunj's hacking speed. That was too fast. How could the K Continent Academy's security system be like a piece of tofu to Bei Yunj? Was it just a piece of tofu? Yeah. I remember that when K University's system was hacked more than 10 years ago, there was an alarm system that would go off. But this time, the hacker must have a good understanding of K University, so they might not trigger the alarm. Bei Yunj thought for a moment before the corners of her lips suddenly curled up into a casual and unrestrained smile. They won't, but I will. Zhong Shenglin had a bad feeling. A few minutes later, Bei Yunj's fingers moved even faster on the keyboard and hacked the entire system. In an instant, Bei Yunj accurately triggered the alarm system. A beam of light shot out from the top of a tall tower not far away and circled around the school. The alarm went off. Everyone in the K Continent Academy noticed it. Someone was hacking their school system. On the other side of Fort Aikenley, 7 people were still hacking. Boss, the K Continent Academy isn't that powerful. We've been hacking for so long, but no one noticed us. Someone couldn't help but say smugly. That person smirked. Don't be careless. Let's get the thing first. Once we're done, we'll throw a celebration party. What's wrong with that? The K Continent Academy is just a bunch of good-looking but useless idiots. The rest of us can't even compare to them. Brothers, let's just get this over with. The other person's tone was sarcastic, and his eyes showed that he was determined to win. After all, this was a meticulous plan. They didn't think there was any possibility of failure. However, the moment he said that, their computer screens suddenly showed that the system had crashed. They didn't even have time to hide their smiles before their eyes widened in shock. Who hacked the K-Continent Academy's system? K-Continent Academy's security system was created by a top hacker in the early years. Even if it was them, they would only dare to invade the loopholes of the K-Continent Academy. But now someone had actually hacked the entire system? The 7 of them were stunned at first. They couldn't figure out which immortal had done this. However, the sudden sound of the alarm made them lose the mood to continue thinking. The leader of the group of 7 stood up abruptly. "Didn't I tell you? They have an alarm and told you not to trigger it." "Who triggered the alarm?" The pale-skinned young man roared in a hoarse voice, as if he was gnashing his teeth. The people from K-Continent Academy had long been on guard against them. Once the alarm went off, their chances of success would drop by at least half. "I didn't trigger the alarm." "Me neither." "Boss, could it be that someone else triggered the alarm?" Someone muttered in a low voice. Hearing this, only then did the pale-skinned youth recall that someone had hacked into the K-Continent Academy's system. But why would that person trigger the alarm if he could hack the Academy's system so discreetly? They could not understand. Then someone guessed, could it be that someone is deliberately showing off to the K-Continent Academy, hacking the school's system and deliberately triggering the alarm? Wasn't this behavior too arrogant? Chapter 1038. But why did it have to be at this time? All of a sudden, they had a bold idea. Someone wanted to make them the scapegoat. The faces of the few of them instantly turned ugly. "B-boss, can we still get the information?" The young man's expression turned ugly. He glanced at them and quickly started typing on the keyboard. But not long after, the young man realized one thing. His location had been counter-tracked. In an instant, the young man's expression darkened. This was also the first time he realized that there was actually someone who could suppress him to the point that he had no room to fight back in this aspect. He couldn't stop the other party's intrusion at all. If this continued, they would definitely be exposed. "Retreat." The young man gritted his teeth and said unwillingly. The others heard this and felt their scalps tingle. Who was this person who could force their boss to retreat? At the same time, Bei Yunj was still holding a candy wrapper in her hand. She leaned against the back seat with interest and slowly checked the other party's computer. Those who didn't know better would think that she was browsing through her own documents. Bei Yunj didn't intend to track the other party's location. She flipped through the documents and turned off the computer after confirming that the other party hadn't achieved his goal. At this moment, someone knocked on the car window. Bei Yunj had just opened the car door when she heard Sung Soo say, "Miss Pei, Dr. Luo is here." "Why are you looking for me?" Luo Xia's tone was cold and his expression looked as if someone owed him a few hundred yuan. Bei Yunj looked up at Luo Xia and smiled lazily. "Dr. Luo, is there a bar near the K-Continent Academy?" Luo Xia couldn't hold back his expression. Sing Su's smile froze. Miss Pei looked so serious just now. He thought that she had something important to ask Dr. Luo. In the end, she just wanted to ask Dr. Luo where a bar was. Miss Pei. Sung Su was on the verge of tears. If Master Du knew that Miss Pei went to a bar, his year-end bonus for the next few years would be gone. Luo Xia's expression was gloomy as he said word by word, hopeless. As soon as he finished speaking, Lai Yunqing walked to Luo Xia's side and said gently, "Luo Xia, accompany me to the conference room. Something happened in the hospital." Luo Xia suppressed his anger and took a deep breath. "Okay." After that, Luo Xia glanced at Bei Yunj and chuckled. "Miss Pei, see you tomorrow." Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows. She still didn't understand what Luo Xia meant. In the conference hall, when Luo Xia and Lai Yunqing arrived, they found that the atmosphere was heavy. Many people were computer experts. "Professor Lai, please take a seat." The dean rubbed his forehead. His scalp still felt numb when he thought about what had just happened. Something very serious happened today. I'm sure everyone can guess what it is. He took a deep breath. Someone hacked our system. Hearing this, The people in the seats were like ants on a hot pan, discussing animatedly. Not long after, someone said, "Dean, since you've asked us to do this, of course we want to help." But there was actually someone who could hack into the K-Continent Academy's system. This is too ridiculous. This person is definitely not simple. Someone immediately chimed in. Yeah, this system was created by the first Busaka Prize winner, Hesselink. After so many years, who can surpass him? P.S. At least 4 chapters today. Also, Oldsu has been sending you red packets for a week. End of chapter. Chapter 1039. If they hadn't seen the system being hacked with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that such a person existed. Thinking of this, their scalps went numb. Someone broke down mentally. Director, if the opponent is already at this stage, we can't guard against it. Today, Continent K Academy had only gathered hundreds of computer experts. But even if Continent K Academy could invite Marcus from Country R and Zhong Shenglin from Country A, they might not be able to guard against it. Suddenly, Lai Yunqing finished observing the hacked website and said, Director, the person who hacked the system is not that group of people. What? How do you know? The others quickly looked at Lai Yunqing. Lai Yunqing smiled. I've fought with that group of people before. The person who hacked the system might have deliberately triggered the alarm system. Hearing this, everyone reacted. That meant that there was a big shot helping them behind the scenes? Everyone was ecstatic, and their desire to ride on someone's coattails grew stronger. Who is helping them behind the scenes? The others were also discussing excitedly. When did such a ruthless person appear in Continent K? Below the stage, a person appeared in Luoxia's mind. But it shouldn't be possible to come to Continent K silently. Thinking of this, Luoxia's heart felt empty. Professor Lai, you know many people in the industry. Do you know the person who is helping us secretly? After someone asked this question, everyone's gaze fell on Lai Yunqing. Lai Yunqing smiled. Senior helping us secretly means that he doesn't want to show his face. However, I know that Mr. Nancy from Country R has recently come to Continent K. Mr. Nancy? The founder of Higgins? Instantly, the crowd was in an uproar. They looked at Lai Yunqing with even more envy. Lai Yunqing was too lucky. She even knew a retired top big shot like Nancy. That's right. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Nancy before. My father is his student. This time, I can try to contact Mr. Nancy. Lai Yunqing smiled faintly. Mr. Nancy should be able to help us. Hearing this, everyone looked at Lai Yunqing with more admiration and envy. Lai Yunqing was also used to such a halo. She subconsciously looked at the absent-minded Luoxia, and couldn't help but smile. Inside the manor, Bei Yunj had just returned home when she received a phone call. Max, where are you now? The caller was Kay, the founder of the Chaos. What happened? Bei Yunj asked lazily. Are you in Continent K? Something strange happened in K-Continent today. Someone hacked into the K-Continent Academy's system. Kay was shocked. Bei Yunj couldn't help but ask, can't I? This is a system created by the first Busaka Prize winner, Hesselink. For so many years, no one dared to challenge him. After saying that, Kay sighed inexplicably. Okay, I got it. Then it shouldn't be you. I thought you were in cahoots with the terrorists and wanted to persuade you to turn back. Bei Yunj. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up. Wait. Before Kay could finish, Bei Yunj hung up. Kay. Didn't he say that he would hang up if there was nothing else? Meanwhile, Bei Yunj turned her head, thinking that the footsteps just now were because someone had returned. She didn't expect it to be Zhou Yu. Bei Yunj's smile disappeared, and Zhou Yu felt a chill down his spine. End of chapter. Chapter 1040. Miss Pei. Zhou Yu had been in Continent K for so many years. Other than Huashidu, Bei Yunj was the first person who gave him a strong sense of oppression. Where is my brother? Bei Yunj's voice was clear. When Huashidu was not around, it sounded cold. Zhou Yu said, Master Du will be back later today. He wants you to eat early and rest well. Bei Yunj glanced at him indifferently and went upstairs. Okay. Zhou Yu's back was already covered in cold sweat. Old Zhou, Why did you come back first? Sung Su asked curiously. Master Du asked me to come over and tell Miss Pei. Zhou Yu suddenly remembered. Oh right, find time to give me Miss Pei's math homework. Sung Su was speechless. The next day, Bei Yunj went downstairs and sat under the huge European-style window. She chewed on her bread and looked at the rose garden outside. When Sung Su walked over, Bei Yunj asked slowly, Brother left again? Sung Su immediately explained. Miss Pei, Master Du did have something urgent to attend to these 2 days. However, Master Du will come and fetch you after your health checkup. Bei Yunj paused. Health checkup? Yes, Master Du has been planning to bring you to Dr. Luo for a long time. Sung Su nodded vigorously. Dr. Luo is very skilled in medicine, especially in psychotherapy. I'm not free. Bei Yunj rejected him perfunctorily. I still have to study. Sung Su thought for a while and could only call Huashidu in front of Bei Yunj. Bei Yunj suddenly stood up and glanced at Sung Su casually. She said with a faint smile, I'll go and change. Sung Su, who felt threatened, said, Thank you, Miss Pei. Soon, Bei Yunj arrived at Luoxia's laboratory. In the laboratory, 4 or 5 researchers were chatting. Do you think there are any other beautiful girls in our circle besides Professor Lai? Damn, what a beautiful girl. Suddenly someone exclaimed. Hearing this, the other person rolled his eyes. Come on, what kind of beauty can there be in this godforsaken place? Before he could finish his sentence, the researcher turned around and saw that Bei Yunj had taken off her hat. Her slender, fair fingers casually brushed her loose black hair. Her beautiful eyes were unruly and bright, and they were dazzling. Wasn't this lady too beautiful? Assistant Sung. Some people were stunned when they saw Sung Su. Sung Su smiled and looked at Bei Yunj. Miss Pei, this is Dr. Luo's laboratory. Bei Yunj glanced at her and responded indifferently. She then sat down on the sofa in the lounge area. The others were discussing wildly. It can't be? Are you here to look for Boss? Boss, don't you like her? How could he know such a beautiful girl? If you put this face in the entertainment industry, you'll be beaten to a pulp. Everyone hadn't finished talking when Luoxia and Lai Yunqing came in together. This made the people who usually thought that Lai Yunqing had the halo of a goddess suddenly feel that Lai Yunqing's goddess halo was unusually dim today. Miss Pei is here too. The smile on Lai Yunqing's face stiffened. Come with me. Luoxia only threw this sentence at her before he changed into his white coat and walked into a private room. Bei Yunj had just stood up when Sung Su followed her closely. Sung Su was still on guard. After all, their Miss Pei was so beautiful. Although Dr. Luo hated Miss Pei, he couldn't help but find her face more and more pleasing to the eye. Chapter 1041. Bei Yunj couldn't be bothered to say anything else and walked straight into the room. Yunqing, you guys go out first. Luoxia gestured for Bei Yunj to sit opposite him and spoke. But Sung Su was worried. After all, they were alone. Assistant Sung, do you want to check for me? Luoxia's tone was unfriendly. Lai Yunqing immediately smiled and said, Assistant Sung, let's go out first. Don't worry. After the others left, Luoxia asked without looking up. Do you have any medical history? Yes. Bei Yunj leaned back lazily. I stayed in a mental hospital for a period of time. Luoxia. He never thought that Huashidu would have such a person by his side. Luoxia took a deep breath. Does Huashidu know? Bei Yunj smiled unruly. He was the one who picked me up from the mental hospital. Luoxia couldn't describe his feelings at this moment. What kind of medicine do you usually use? Luoxia didn't understand Huashidu's thoughts, but at the same time, he couldn't tell that Bei Yunj was actually someone from a mental hospital. Dr. Luo, tell me how much it costs to end this conversation. Bei Yunj said unhurriedly. These words made Luoxia's thoughts stop for a few seconds. He smiled slightly. Do I lack money? Your medical equipment should have been used for a long time, right? Our nation's Medical Research Institute has produced a batch of new medical equipment in batches. This stunned Luoxia for a moment. Of course, he knew that the medical equipment of our nation's Medical Research Institute was developed by them. However, because it wasn't widely available on the market, He couldn't get those equipment for the time being. Miss Pei, is your channel really your own channel? Luoxia's tone couldn't hide the sarcasm. He was certain that she wanted Hoshiru to help. Bei Yunj only glanced at him leisurely. If Dr. Luo wants it, you have to listen to me. Luoxia looked at Bei Yunj for a long time and said slowly, Bei Yunj, you don't seem to want Hoshiru to know about your condition. Why? Bei Yunj's eyes moved slightly and she only glanced at him. Dr. Luo, think about it. There are only 2 sets of medical equipment. With that said, the conversation was over. Luoxia had just gone out when Lai Yunqing hurriedly approached in high heels. Luoxia, she has already arrived at the airport. Come with me to pick her up. Listen to Yan. Luoxia replied, all right. Then he turned to Bei Yunj and said, I will think about Miss Pei's matter again. Something happened at the K-Continent Academy recently, and I have to go out. I'll have to trouble Miss Pei to wait here. Do you need help? Bei Yunj asked with a rare smile. At this time, she didn't mind Luoxia owing her a favor. Lai Yunqing smiled and said, Miss Pei shouldn't be able to help us. This time, we are going to pick up an important person. He doesn't like insignificant people. Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. Airport. Lai Yunqing looked at Luoxia with a sweet expression. Luoxia, thank you for accompanying me. You're welcome. Luoxia suddenly asked. I heard that Mr. Nancy has a good relationship with the Computing Institute. Yes, Zhong Shenglin seems to have attended Mr. Nancy's class in the past. After Lai Yunqing finished speaking, she saw Nancy walking out of the airport with a few bodyguards behind him. Mr. Nancy. Lai Yunqing hurriedly walked over and started to exchange greetings. I haven't seen you in a long time. I didn't expect you to come to K-Continent personally. Nancy frowned subconsciously. He didn't know who he had sent the last voice message to, but he was as irritable as thunder. Try not to come and see me. If you don't come and see me, I don't want you to care about me in the future. Chapter 1042. After shouting, Nancy still felt that it wasn't enough and fiercely said, Hurry up and go back with me. You're not allowed to stay here. After speaking, Luoxia and Lai Yunqing were both stunned. They suddenly wondered who could make Mr. Nancy so irritable. Nancy's anger hadn't subsided. He glanced at Lai Yunqing and Luoxia and his tone became cold, making people feel alienated. Why are you looking for me? Lai Yunqing smiled and said, Mr. Nancy, have you booked a place to stay? If not, how about I accompany you to the K-Continent Academy? I don't have time. I'm here to catch someone. Nancy chuckled and gritted his teeth. Bei Yunj, this guy, who knew how many people in K-Continent were eyeing her covetously. He actually came to K-Continent. If Zhong Shenglin hadn't said yesterday that the person who hacked the K-Continent Academy system was Bei Yunj, he wouldn't have known that this little bastard had come to K-Continent. Catch someone? Lai Yunqing's smile stiffened. Facing this old man who once stood at the top of this circle was indeed a lot of pressure. Although she was called by many seniors, she could see that Nancy didn't want to talk about his personal affairs. Lai Yunqing quickly changed the topic and smiled. You just arrived here. I'm afraid you won't be able to find him for a while. Lai Yunqing had already promised that she would definitely bring Nancy to the K-Continent Academy. Of course, she didn't want to slap her own face. She bit her lip and insisted. Mr. Nancy, there have been many seminars recently. In everyone's heart, you are an unsurpassable senior. They definitely want to see you. And what if there is an unexpected gain? Lai Yunqing actually wanted to learn from Nancy. After all, Nancy's achievements in computing were even more outstanding than Zhong Shenglin and Marcus. However, Nancy said that he would never accept students in his life. What's there to not surpass? Nancy just laughed casually, but Lai Yunqing thought that Nancy was being modest. Your achievements in this life, if you didn't leave later, you could completely match Hesselink. If it was before, Nancy would be unhappy to hear this. But now Nancy smiled. I can't match him, but there will always be someone who can, or even surpass him. After that, Nancy walked forward, and Lai Yunqing was stunned for a moment. She didn't understand what Nancy meant. Surpass? Surpass Hesselink? Lai Yunqing only felt that it was absurd and impossible. But at this time, Nancy had already agreed to take a look at the K-Continent Academy. In the car, Nancy was still persistently calling for people to die. Lai Yunqing and Luo squinted at Nancy, who had been on the phone for more than 20 minutes. They admired the person who didn't answer the phone. A few minutes later, the call went through. In Luoxia's laboratory, Bei Yunj was lazily playing with the computer. "Master, my phone ran out of battery just now. What's the matter?" Nancy's face almost collapsed from anger. "Do you think I'm a fool? Don't think I don't know that you're deliberately ignoring me. How would I dare?" Bei Yunj's lazy tone was also faint. The other people in the laboratory couldn't help but look at Bei Yunj with distressed expressions. Which Zhou Renpi was this? How could he be so fierce to this Miss Xinyan? Nancy was still angry. He smiled faintly. "You don't dare? I'm at the K-Continent Academy now. If you don't come to pick me up later, I won't leave. I'll go on a hunger strike here." Bei Yunj. End of chapter. Chapter 1043. Bei Yunj's eyebrows twitched. "Why are you going to K-Continent Academy for no reason?" "You can go, but I can't?" Nancy snorted and said domineeringly. "I'll give you an hour. You must appear in front of me." With that said, Nancy hung up the phone. Bei Yunj was speechless. In the laboratory, Sung Su asked, "Miss, what happened?" Bei Yunj put her phone back into her pocket and pressed her white hat on her hair. "I'm going to K-Continent Academy to pick someone up." Half an hour later, Nancy appeared at K-Continent Academy. The school leaders were at the entrance. "It really is Nancy." Even the dean sucked in a breath of cold air. When Lai Yunqing saw this, the corners of her lips curled up. She turned around and said to Nancy in a voice that was neither loud nor soft, "We're here. Thank you for coming with me." When the others heard this, they looked at Lai Yunqing even more fervently. Nancy actually gave Lai Yunqing face and came to K-Continent Academy? Nancy glanced at Lai Yunqing and didn't say anything. He just stood beside Luoxia naturally. As for the calm Luoxia, he was inexplicably nervous when he saw this god that the scientific research world couldn't surpass. Lai Yunqing didn't show any embarrassment on her face, and just followed beside Nancy. "Mr. Nancy, it's an honor to meet you. It's really the blessing of K-Continent Academy to be able to come and guide you after you retire." The director was so excited that he was almost incoherent, let alone the others. Nancy's status in the industry could be said to be an unshakable legend. Switching to scientific research at the age of 20, and winning the Busaka Prize at the age of 30. Anyone would think that this was cheating. Nancy frowned and glanced at him indifferently. "Director, you're too polite. I'm just taking a look around." "Then come with me to the office first. I've already prepared afternoon tea." Nancy's face was expressionless, but he soon nodded. He was indeed tired from rushing from Nili to Yuncheng, and then to K-Continent. "The rest of you, go to the conference room and wait," the director said happily. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but discuss after the director and the others left. Was it really Lai Yunqing who invited him? Then her connections are too terrifying. Otherwise, how could it be you? Lai Yunqing is really a goddess. If I was so familiar with Mr. Nancy, I would have taken it out to show off. But what about her? He was humble and low-key, and didn't say anything. Exactly. If I can get acquainted with Mr. Nancy, I can brag about it for the rest of my life. "Yunqing, thank you for bringing Mr. Nancy here." The dean's tone was amiable. "It's nothing. It's what I should do." Lai Yunqing chuckled. "Besides, Grandpa Nancy is actually very easy to talk to. Isn't it because you have a good relationship? Mr. Nancy gave you face." The dean continued. "Yunqing, if I can get Mr. Nancy to help us, we can only rely on you." "But," Lai Yunqing's smile froze as she hesitated. "No buts, only you can say that in front of Nancy." Lai Yunqing could only agree to try. After all, even if Nancy didn't give her face, she wouldn't give anyone else face either. A short while later, Lai Yunqing walked in front of Nancy with a troubled expression. "Actually, Mr. Nancy, I'm looking for you this time to ask for help. Our Academy K has been targeted by criminals. Last time, Someone deliberately hacked the system. Nancy quickly looked up at her with a cold gaze. Deliberately hacked the system? Lai Yunqing realized that she had said something wrong, but still forced a smile. You can't be using the Academy K's system to practice, right? Nancy's voice was even colder, and his tone was sarcastic. Don't you know that I don't like to meddle in other people's business? When he left this circle, he was completely disappointed with it. Now that he looked at it, it hadn't changed at all. If he didn't know that it was Bei Yunj who did it, he would have believed her. Lai Yunqing's face stiffened. She didn't expect Nancy to reject her so directly. If you're looking for me for this purpose, I can leave now. Nancy's tone was cold. Lai Yunqing immediately panicked. I'm sorry, I didn't know that you don't like to meddle in other people's business. Nancy only glanced at Lai Yunqing. Although he didn't say anything, it didn't mean that he didn't know what this girl was thinking. He just turned a blind eye. There was no need to embarrass the younger generation. Outside the door. How was it? Did Mr. Nancy agree? The dean asked agitatedly. Lai Yunqing hid the embarrassed expression on her face and shook her head again. The corners of her mouth curled into a helpless arc. Dean, it's not like you don't know Grandpa Nancy's temper. No matter who tries to persuade him, it won't work. When the dean heard this, his body froze. Then what should we do? Dean, it's not easy for Grandpa Nancy to come here. Lai Yunqing sighed helplessly. At the same time, Bei Yunj had just arrived at the entrance of the Academy K when she called Nancy, wanting to ask him to come out. Unexpectedly, Nancy insisted that she go in to look for him. Miss Pei, doesn't the person you want to pick up want to come out? Sung Su couldn't help but ask. Bei Yunj sneered lazily. I'm going in to pick him up. The old master has a bad temper. When he heard this, Sung Su also guessed who the old master Bei Yunj was talking about was. Don't tell me there's some random people from the outside world? But he didn't expect. Bei Yunj walked all the way to the conference room. When she opened the door, there were many well-known researchers who looked familiar. Bei Yunj's eyelids twitched. Before she could say a word, the door automatically closed. But when she turned around, she didn't expect to see Lai Yunqing. Lai Yunqing saw Bei Yunj at this juncture and smiled insincerely. Miss Pei, you seem to like squeezing into other people's circle. But this circle is different. If you want to step into it, you have to be strong. The sarcasm in her words was obvious. Bei Yunj chuckled softly. Why? Have you fixed the lighthouse alarm line last night? Lai Yunqing's face turned red and her eyes shot out fierceness. Bei Yunj's words were a slap to the Academy K's face. But the next moment, before Lai Yunqing could speak, Luo Xie opened the door. He asked, Bei Yunj, what are you doing here? Bei Yunj thought for a moment and glanced at them. I heard that Nancy is here. When they heard this, they immediately understood who Bei Yunj was here for. She was really well informed. Lai Yunqing's eyes were filled with sarcasm. She laughed softly. Miss Pei, do you have any relationship with Old Master Nancy? Old Master Nancy will come down to discuss the gathering later. If Miss Pei has nothing else to do, why don't you wait outside? But just as she finished speaking, a voice sounded behind her. Why are you gathered at the door? The person who spoke was the dean, and the person beside him was Nancy. End of chapter. Chapter 1044. Lai Yunqing's face froze, but she quickly smiled. Nothing, we're discussing something. Bei Yunj glanced at Nancy and was about to speak, but Nancy spoke first. Yo, where did this student come from? Bei Yunj was speechless. What a drama queen. In the hall, Lai Yunqing's eyes showed a hint of mockery, but the dean was a little puzzled. Given Nancy's character, if she really did not know him, she would not speak. However, suddenly, a girl ran down the corridor and bumped into Sung Su. The dean reprimanded her. What's wrong with you? Why are you running around the corridor? If she bumped into Nancy, there would be trouble. The girl looked up and her face was full of tears. I am sorry. Lai Yunqing frowned. Valerie, aren't you in class? Valerie was the newly hired teaching assistant of Continent K Academy. She was an intern in our nation's computing institute and taught Lai Yunqing's younger brother's class. Professor Lai. Valerie was very pretty, and she cried like a pear blossom. Please help me change classes. I really can't take your brother anymore. Valerie, you have to remember your place. Do you think you can change the rules of the academy just because you want to? Lai Yunqing's voice was cold. The dean more or less understood what was going on. Lai Yunqing had a younger brother who seemed to have been found 2 years ago. Because of his high IQ, he was highly valued by the Lai family. However, he liked to touch female students and teachers. This matter had been blocked by Lai Yunqing many times. Furthermore, Nancy was still here. The dean coughed lightly. Valerie, let's talk about this next time. Hurry up and go to class. When Valerie heard this, her whole body trembled and her eyes were filled with fear. Young lady, you're crying like this. Did something happen? Nancy frowned. When Valerie saw Nancy, her eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Nancy, it's just a small matter. Young people like to blow things up. The dean smiled and was about to ask Nancy to go back. Immediately after. Then he heard the girl's lazy and pleasant voice. Thank you, Professor Lai, for letting me sit in on your class. Do you mind if I go back with this teaching assistant? Hearing this, Valerie felt that the voice was a little familiar and subconsciously turned around. When he saw the beautiful girl in front of him, he froze. What followed was joy and excitement, and the light in his eyes shone brightly. Why? The smile in Bei Yunji's eyes faded. Only then did Valerie remember that her identity was confidential. But she actually met him here. Bei Yunji pulled out a tissue and handed it to Valerie. Her voice was not gentle. It's just a class. What's there to cry about? Valerie, on the other hand, sobbed and felt inexplicably relieved. She obediently took the tissue and didn't say anything. She didn't know if the teacher remembered her. Back then, she had only attended the teacher's class once. Although she couldn't understand anything, she couldn't forget the teacher's face. Later on, she also wanted to apply to be the teacher's student, but she was told that he no longer took in interns. This was Valerie's regret. She was only ranked 3rd in the beginning of her internship. If she had scored a little higher, she might have been the teacher's student. At this moment, Lai Yunqing's face stiffened. She didn't know how to stop Bei Yunji. But soon, Lai Yunqing also comforted herself. Bei Yunji wasn't even from continent K, so how could she go against her? Chapter 1045. Nancy could tell that Bei Yunji knew this girl. She said casually. Top universities should be quite open about their resources, right, Dean? The dean could only reply, yes, yes. Let's go, little teaching assistant. After Bei Yunji finished speaking lazily, Sung Su was stunned. Miss, I have something to call you. You don't have to follow me. Bei Yunji turned around and saw a piece of paper behind Valerie. On the paper was written, I'm a green sow. Bei Yunji's eyes darkened and she quickly tore it off. This action also shocked Valerie. She couldn't help but turn around in fear. Tay teacher? Bei Yunji crumpled the paper into a ball and threw it into the trash can. She said slowly, it's okay. On the way, Valerie asked cautiously with a hint of nervousness in her voice. Teacher, do you remember me? Bei Yunji said. You're the girl in the 3rd row who passed Tich a note. Valerie was speechless. Her teacher's memory was invincible. Teacher, I was just asking Tich some questions. I was afraid that I would disturb your class, so I... Valerie immediately explained. Bei Yunji replied indifferently. Why are you here as a teaching assistant? The exchange at the Research Institute was suggested by Director Marcus. Bei Yunji snorted. Marcus really likes to find trouble for no reason. Valerie was speechless. Still, he dared to talk back to anyone. Not long after, Valerie followed Bei Yunji into the classroom. She was also afraid that Lai Yunheng would bring other boys to tease Bei Yunji. Pay attention in class. Bei Yunji glanced at the worried Valerie. Valerie pursed her lips. Before she could say anything, she heard whistling from inside the classroom. This was a top university. Because of the bad behavior of a powerful person, many people were following them. Is this the new female student? She's too beautiful. Many boys were cheering. However, when Bei Yunji walked in and glanced at them casually, they felt an inexplicable sense of oppression that made them not dare to smile anymore. Let's continue with the class. As soon as Valerie finished speaking, someone in the audience followed suit and shouted, "Why don't you introduce yourself? If you're shy, why don't we introduce you to someone first?" The audience roared with laughter. Valerie's face turned green. But then, she heard Bei Yunj ask calmly, "Are you in a hurry to introduce yourself because you're afraid that people won't be able to find a place to visit your grave?" In an instant, there was dead silence in the arena. Many people could tell that this new face was not someone to be trifled with. Some people also noticed that Bei Yunj's wristwatch was worth at least 8 digits. She was a classic example of someone born into a super wealthy family. Many people didn't dare to provoke Bei Yunj, but when Bei Yunj went to get the teaching materials, a young man in a sweatshirt suddenly shouted casually, "Miss Valerie, I don't understand a question." This was Lai Yunheng. "Bring it up." Valerie's face didn't look too good, but she could only say, "Miss Valerie, my leg is not very convenient. Why don't you come down and explain it to me?" Lai Yunheng leaned back and waited for Valerie to come down. Valerie's face changed, but she could only walk over. When Valerie came closer, Lai Yunheng took out the question and listened to her explanation. However, the others saw that Lai Yunheng was wearing slippers and holding a mirror between his toes. He aimed at the bottom of Valerie's skirt. The boys took the opportunity to take pictures. Lai Yunheng smiled slyly. End of chapter. Chapter 1046. However, not long after, Bei Yunj happened to return and saw this scene. She slowly bit down on the candy on the tip of her tongue, but her footsteps didn't stop as she walked to Valerie's side. Her beautiful eyes were slightly raised, but she was overflowing with hostility. The next moment, Bei Yunj's clean black leather boots stepped on Lai Yunheng's toes, and the sound of the mirror shattering could be heard. Lai Yunheng's face was twisted and hideous, and his painful howl sent chills down everyone's spine. Everyone lowered their heads. He saw the playful smile on Bei Yunj's face. She was still in high spirits, but under her black leather boots, there was a glaring blood. The scene was chilling. Valerie's face turned pale when she saw this scene. Her voice trembled as she said, Teacher." But at this moment, no one was paying attention to what Valerie was saying. Bei Yunj smiled and said, "Student, your feet are quite long." It was not that there was no one in the K-Continent Academy who had a better background than Lai Yunheng, but they would not spoil their own interests for a piece of rat sh*t. Lai Yunheng didn't expect that the day he kicked an iron board would come so soon. Bei Yunj moved the soles of her shoes away, but Lai Yunheng's toes were almost cut off. It was a tragic sight. "How dare you do this to me? Do you know who I am? My sister is Lai Yunqing." Lai Yunheng's face was full of pain, but he still yelled at Bei Yunj fiercely. "I see." Bei Yunj smirked and raised her eyebrows playfully. "What a pity. I never look at the owner when I hit a dog." Not long after, Lai Yunheng was sent to the hospital. Bei Yunj looked at the others with interest. But when Bei Yunj was called away, the others broke out in cold sweat. Who was this person? She was too cruel. Lai Yunheng's toes were almost cut off. In the dean's office, the dean's face was ashen. Valerie's face was pale. "Dean, actually, shut up. I'll deal with you later." After the director of the hospital roared, he said to Bei Yunj, "Who are you? How dare you cause trouble in our school?" My classmate stretched his leg too far and accidentally stepped on it. Bei Yunj smiled lightly. The dean was so angry that his entire body was trembling. "You." He knew what kind of person Lai Yunheng was. If not for the fact that Lai Yunheng's talent was not inferior to Lai Yunqing's, he would not have allowed Lai Yunheng to stay. He did not doubt that Lai Yunheng would do such a thing. But this silly little girl was too ruthless in her actions. Something happened to Lai Yunheng in the K-Continent Academy. "Get your parents here. I want to see what kind of background you have," the dean said with a dark face. He had to deal with this person today so that he could give the Lai family an explanation. "Dean, this has nothing to do with her. It's all because..." Before Valerie could finish, Bei Yunj went up to make a call. At this moment, Marcus was brushing his teeth when he answered the phone, but he was wide awake when he heard Bei Yunj's voice. "There's something that you need to resolve." Bei Yunj's voice was emotionless. "Guh." Marcus was stunned. He did not know what was going on. In 10 minutes, the K-Continent Academy will be connected to the dean's office for a conference call. Baiyunj looked at his watch. At first, the dean thought that Baiyunj was pretending to be mysterious. But before he could mock him, a video conference call came. He was stunned. This number was a little familiar. Chapter 1047. Marcus didn't have time to go to the conference room, so he could only start a video conference. He was wearing a suit shirt and a pair of blue shorts. He looked very refined. What's going on? Why are you at the K-Continent Academy? Marcus asked in bewilderment. The dean of the K-Continent Academy pondered for a while, and his face stiffened. He couldn't figure out how Baiyunj knew Marcus. Aren't you going to tell me why my student was sent to the K-Continent Academy as a teaching assistant? Baiyunj sat on the sofa, glanced at Marcus and asked casually. Marcus paused and glanced at Valerie. Valerie? Since when was Valerie her student? She attended one of my classes. Baiyunj said naturally. Marcus was speechless. After attending one of her classes, she was her student. That meant that he had students all over the world. Valerie is your student? The dean was stunned. Valerie looked older than Baiyunj. Saying that Baiyunj was Valerie's student was more like it. Marcus was also a smart person. He could see that Valerie's eyes were red. She might have been wronged and Baiyunj saw it. He sighed. He knew what Baiyunj wanted to do. Soon, a smile appeared on Marcus' face. You still don't know her? Then let me introduce her to you. This is the former member of our country's computing institute that you mentioned to me more than a dozen times. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone suddenly fell silent. The dean froze, and his mind was in a mess. Well, what? What did she mean? This was... The dean immediately turned his head and looked at the girl who was less than 20 years old in front of him. There was only one thought in his mind. She was King done for. That's not right. How could you not know? Didn't we remind you that criminals had hacked into your system yesterday? The dean's face turned paler with every word Marcus said. It was they had hacked into the system. Let's talk about how to deal with my student, who was sexually harassed in your school. Baiyunj glanced at his phone and threw the evidence that Kay had found to the dean. The dean's face turned pale after reading it. Baiyunj found Lai Yunheng's private group chat. There were all kinds of unsightly chat records. Last month, someone deliberately wet Valerie's clothes with water. Half a month ago, someone took the opportunity to hug Valerie and discussed in the group chat about Valerie's touch with other girls. A few days ago, someone had even left a note in Valerie's office filled with obscenities. Teacher, I didn't expect Valerie to be your student. The dean's to Valerie's face. I shouldn't have left Lai Yunheng alive. Baiyunj chuckled softly, but the smile did not reach his eyes. He said slowly, I didn't expect that someone would dare to touch my student. Her eyes curved as she continued to ask him in a good mood, but her tone was gentle. Dean, do you think the reputation of the K-Country Academy will be destroyed in my hands? The dean's face turned pale. The scientific research community was undoubtedly the most competitive. Back then, in order to make him an honorary professor, Neely University had reportedly reached an in-depth cooperation with the Computing Institute. If he expressed his stance on this matter, the consequences would be unimaginable. P.S. Good night. Chapter 1048. Hearing this, Valerie, who was beside her, was a little helpless. She only dared to look at Baiyunj's faint smile. However, just as the dean was at a loss, the door to the dean's office was suddenly pushed open. Lai Yunqing walked in with a dark expression. When she saw Baiyunj, she sneered. Wow, Miss Pei is still here. Yunqing. The dean was so frightened that his temples throbbed. He couldn't help but scold her. Lai Yunqing was considered the most promising newcomer in Continent K, so she had the right to be arrogant. However, the person sitting on the sofa opposite her was no ordinary person. It was the person who was nominated for both the Busaka and Farisk Awards. Lai Yunqing narrowed her eyes. She didn't know what it meant for the dean to help Baiyunj. Instead, she sneered. Dean, I've been with Continent K for many years. Now that my brother's leg is about to be crippled, why are you helping an outsider instead of helping me? Yunqing, you have to know how bad Lai Yunqing's behavior is in school. The dean's expression was ugly. He didn't dare to say anything in front of Bei Yunj. Moreover, the video conference was still going on. Marcus and the others saw this scene. Ha. Okay. Lai Yunqing sneered and nodded. Bad behavior? It seems that in the vice dean's eyes, as an associate professor and Lai Yunheng's sister, I have a stain on my record. Since that's the case, there's no need for me to continue staying here. Professor Lai, I didn't think of it that way. The dean started to have a headache. Lai Yunqing was a core member of Continent K's computing association. If Lai Yunqing left, it would affect Continent K's academy greatly. Now, as Lai Yunheng's sister, I just want to seek justice for my brother. I want the person who hurt him to pay the price. Lai Yunqing stared at Bei Yunj gloomily and sneered. Miss Pei, I didn't argue with you because you were Luo Xie's friend. However, if you can't give me an explanation, you'd better call your parents here. Our Lai family is not to be trifled with in Continent K. Hearing this, the principal's heart skipped a beat. He was afraid that if Bei Yunj was unhappy, she would punish Lai Yunqing along with the Academy of K Continent. Suddenly, a burst of applause attracted Lai Yunqing's attention. Good, Professor Lai is really bold. Lai Yunqing took a closer look and recognized that the person in the video conference was Marcus. Her face turned pale. Director Marcus. She had almost forgotten that no matter how weak Valerie's background was, she was still from the Our Nation's Computing Institute. And her brother had indeed been harassing the people at Country R's Computing Institute. True enough. Marcus laughed, but his eyes were cold. I haven't even gotten an explanation for the sexual harassment of the members I targeted. Yet Professor Lai has come knocking on my door. Lai Yunqing looked flustered. She really didn't expect that the director's office was still holding a video conference. He was just an ordinary member. Why was a core member of the Our Nation's Research Institute attending a meeting? Just as Marcus was about to launch an attack, he suddenly paused and smiled meaningfully. Isn't Professor Lai looking for Miss Pei's parents? Lai Yunqing was stunned by this sudden question. But then, a familiar voice sounded outside the door. Who's looking for me? Lai Yunqing's expression changed. She turned around and saw Nancy. End of chapter. Chapter 1049. What was going on? Bei Yunj's parent was Nancy? Why? The color drained from Lai Yunqing's face, and the dean subconsciously closed his eyes, feeling very regretful. Sure enough, Nance knew Bei Yunj from the start. Marcus? What are you doing here? Nancy's tone was full of wariness. Don't think that he didn't know that Marcus and Zhong Shenglin were like ghosts, thinking about how to kidnap other people's disciples every day. Teacher Nancy, it was your student who hurt Professor Lai's brother for the sake of a member of our institute. Look, someone is here to denounce her. Hearing Marcus's words, Lai Yunqing's expression became even worse. Bei Yunj was Nancy's student? What was going on? Didn't Nancy never accept students? How could Bei Yunj become Nancy's student? However, after Nancy learned the truth, his face darkened. Bei Yunj. Bei Yunj's fingers, which were holding the candy wrapper, paused. What do you mean? I pretended not to know you. Don't you know how to coax an old man like me? You even called Marcus this lousy guy? Nancy was stunned. Then he said angrily, Bei Yunj. Marcus. Marcus's team couldn't help but lower their heads, not daring to look at their leader's expression. Nancy's eyes widened, and the more he spoke, the sadder he became. What, do you want to change masters? To think that I didn't even sleep for 3 days looking for you. Sure enough, this little girl doesn't have a heart at all. Bei Yunj's eyebrows moved, and the corners of his lips twitched. After a while he said, I didn't mean that. Marcus's heart was sour and he despised Nancy, this old bastard. Before he became Bei Yunj's master, he always called her good Gu-er. After he became her master, he treated himself like Gu-er's grandfather every day, and he even asked Gu-er to coax him. Was there anyone more shameless than this old thing? Valerie is from Marcus's institute. Bei Yunj's eyelids twitched, and he could only lick his red lips as he explained. Didn't you hear what he said? He told you to call your parents, and Marcus is your parent? In Nancy's mind, she kept imagining Marcus seizing the opportunity to seize power in her absence. She couldn't wait to fight with Marcus. Marcus. Was this old thing was getting more and more out of control? Pei Yunj and Nance never thought that Nance's brain would be like this. Weren't you unwilling? The girl's usually high-spirited face revealed a hint of helplessness. Nancy's entire body. Everyone's a Yunjazan? Nancy's? These are two different things. This old man only has one disciple in his life. How can I let others bully her? Lai Yunqing had just heard Nancy's words when his cold gaze slowly swept over her. Professor Lai, do you have any advice for this old man's education? Lai Yunqing trembled. His body was already cold. How many people in this circle dared to challenge Nancy? This matter has nothing to do with Professor Lai. Professor Lai has been in a bad mood recently, and he offended Mr. Nancy and Miss Pei. The dean seized the opportunity to make Lai Yunqing owe him a favor. End of chapter. Chapter 1050. Just as expected. Lai Yunqing looked at the dean gratefully, but when he glanced at Pei Yunj, there was still a trace of unwillingness in his eyes. After Lai Yunqing left, Mr. Nancy Marcus, our school has decided to expel Lai Yunheng and give Miss Valerie some financial compensation. The dean asked carefully. What do you think of this? This has nothing to do with me. Nancy snorted coldly, and was about to ask Pei Yunj to leave when he heard the dean hurriedly say, Teacher, since you've already helped us once, can we beg you to help us again? As soon as the dean finished speaking, Nancy subconsciously looked at him with a trace of shock in his eyes. How did he know Guer's identity? Half a minute later, Nancy said to Pei Yunj, You go back first, I still have something to say. Pei Yunj nodded. After he left, the atmosphere became even colder. Dean Donner, your identity can't be revealed to the public. Nancy's face was expressionless, and his pair of eagle-like blue eyes revealed an inviolable majesty. The dean smiled. I didn't tell Professor Lai Yunqing either, right? Don't worry, teacher has helped our school before. Why would I harm her? On the contrary, if teacher can become our school's honorary professor, I will do my best to protect her reputation. It wasn't that the dean didn't know that those who met her would definitely sign a confidentiality agreement. But unfortunately, he didn't sign that confidentiality agreement. No one would have thought that he would expose his identity for a student he met by chance. Nancy's eyes darkened. He understood what the dean meant. He could keep it a secret, but he had to help him solve the problem he was facing, get more benefits for the K-Continent Academy, and stand on the same side as the K-Continent Academy. Donner, you're quite ambitious. Nancy's tone revealed a lot of anger. But at this time, the dean was fearless because of this. Especially now, when he was still alone in the K-Continent Academy. Mr. Nancy, please think about it. Besides, this is not a bad thing for the teacher. The dean's eyes flashed with greed. At that time, it was rumored that he was about 35 years old. But he never would have thought that. He wasn't even 20 years old. Such a super genius could bring too many benefits to their academy. Therefore, even if he offended Nancy, he still wanted to obtain these unimaginable benefits. Nancy sneered and said angrily, Donner, do you really think that I can't do anything to you now that I'm no longer in this circle? She's my disciple. If you dare to let anything happen to her, I have plenty of ways to tear down your academy. After that, Nancy slammed the door and left. But as soon as he turned the corner, he saw Pei Yunj waiting lazily at the door. Seeing Nance's furious expression, Pei Yunj knew in her heart that she would definitely be reprimanded this time. She thought quickly and had just organized her words when Nancy suddenly walked towards her and raised her hand. Pei Yunj had an inexplicable bad feeling in her heart. She lowered her head subconsciously, but she didn't expect that in the next moment, a warm and dry palm would suddenly rub her head. After Nancy's faint sigh dissipated, only the curvature of her mouth remained. Let's go home. This guy was more unbridled than when he was young. Nancy knew very well what Pei Yunj was thinking. End of chapter. Chapter 1051. If Bei Yunj had only helped Valerie deal with someone, Valerie would probably get into even bigger trouble in the future. By doing this, she was undoubtedly protecting Valerie's path of retreat. Bei Yunj's eyebrows twitched. This was the first time she had seen Nancy so gentle. "Master, you're not angry anymore?" Nancy walked in front of Bei Yunj and snorted lightly. "Since you're born as a human, you have to live like a human. What's there to be angry about?" As a researcher, a sense of mission was greater than one's own strength. This was the right direction for future research and development. Bei Yunj's lips curled up as she walked slowly behind him. You have to remember that the older generation of researchers in your country are worthy of respect by countless people. Nancy narrowed his eyes and recalled the memories of Zhong Shenglin and the others secretly coming to his class. He could not help but chuckle silently. Nancy changed his profession at the age of 20 and became the principal of Neely University at the age of 30. It was also during those years that he met Zhong Shenglin. At that time, the scientific research and technology of country, it was very different from that of country R. As a result, even the extremely talented Zhong Shenglin suffered a lot when he was studying abroad. However, Zhong Shenglin was willing to study wholeheartedly. He often hid in a corner and listened to Nancy teach graduate students. Nancy pretended not to know. In the 9th year, Zhong Shenglin won the KZ Busako Award. After that, Zhong Shenglin resolutely chose to develop in the country when faced with the temptation of a salary that was hundreds of times higher overseas. Even in the few years when he returned, he had faced resistance from the domestic circle because of differences in views. However, in Nancy's eyes, old researchers like Zhong Shenglin should be remembered the most in history. Bei Yunj glanced at Nancy. These words were often said to her by Meng Liang in her previous life. Not long after, before Bei Yunj could speak, she heard Nancy say angrily, "Who does Donner think he is? How dare he threaten me? When I destroyed the entire circle back then, he was still playing with mud somewhere." Bei Yunj, who was walking behind them, was speechless. "Bei Yunj, listen to me. Only those cowardly and incompetent masters would make their disciples behave themselves. What's wrong with my disciple being a little arrogant? Even if you poke a hole in the sky, I have a way to cover it." Nancy was also a hot topic in the circle back then. Because of Nancy, Neely University became the world's top school. "Go back first. Come find me at 73, Cliff Road tomorrow." Nancy glanced at her and said, "Master, why don't we have a meal together?" Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows. "I still have to deal with something. Let's talk about it tomorrow." Nancy left in a hurry. Bei Yunj looked at Nancy's back with an obscure look in her eyes. Not long after, the corners of her lips curled up again. "Miss Pei, Master Du is here." Sang Su hurried over again. "Go buy me some drinks. I'm going back to find him now." Bei Yunj nodded. After Tseng Su left, she called Shang Yan. "What's wrong?" Shang Yan was already used to Bei Yunj not visiting him for no reason. Bei Yunj smiled straightforwardly. "President Shang, I seem to have caused some trouble." Shang Yan was speechless. "What did you do?" Shang Yan pressed between his eyebrows. "I'm at Continent K Academy. The dean already knows my identity." Bei Yunj's eyes curved as she slowly chewed on the candy, but there was no warmth in her eyes. "Find a chance to get the dean to sign a confidentiality agreement. P.S. After today's update, I'll send a red packet." End of chapter. Chapter 1052. Got it. Shang Yan pressed between his eyebrows. Just as he was about to say something, Bei Yunj suddenly saw Huashidu on the phone in the car. She looked at the man's handsome side profile with interest and subconsciously lowered her voice. "President Shang, let's talk next time." At this moment, Nieyu asked, "Sir, did Elder Miss cause trouble again?" Shang Yan curled his lips. "Yes, go and settle these matters later. Actually, you can let me handle Elder Miss's matter directly. You don't have to." Before Nieyu could finish speaking, he noticed Shang Yan's indifferent gaze sweeping over him. Instantly, Nieyu fell silent. On campus, Bei Yunj had just knocked on Huashida's car window when Sung Su suddenly called and said that he had not found the way. Bei Yunj's eyelids twitched and she had no choice but to look for Tseng Su first. However, halfway through the journey, Sengsu was very happy. Miss Pei, I've found Master Du. Bei Yunj was speechless. Pei. Before Sengsu could finish speaking, Bei Yunj hung up the phone and walked back. But not long after, Bei Yunj suddenly saw a beautiful girl standing beside the man's back. The girl blushed and looked at the man shyly. Soon she tiptoed and wanted to kiss the man's side profile. Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows and her beautiful eyes darkened. She quickly walked to the man's side and gently held the girl's cheek with one hand. She chuckled lazily, her eyes seductive. Classmate, whose person are you kissing? The girl looked up and saw the excessively beautiful girl in front of her. She was stunned for a moment. But soon she said angrily, "Who is she? Suyu, you bastard." Bei Yunj was about to say something when she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Who was this girl scolding? Bei Yunj suddenly had a bad feeling. As expected, she turned around and heard the man's chuckle. Where did this little girl come from? She has a sense of justice. This was not Huashida's voice at all. Bei Yunj looked up and met Suyu's eyes. Bei Yunj couldn't be blamed for admitting his mistake. Today, Huashidu was different from usual. He was wearing a smoky gray suit. His posture was tall and straight, and he fully displayed his elegance and arrogance. He was both lustful and refined. Judging from the man's height and the suit he was wearing, it was easy to confuse him from the back. Yin. Suddenly, a low and magnetic voice sounded from not far away. The main character had appeared. Bei Yunj. A short while later, Bei Yunj slowly turned her head and looked at the angry girl in front of her. The two of them looked at each other. Bei Yunj also looked very natural. Then, before the girl could react, Bei Yunj suddenly gave the girl a hug and said politely, "Sorry for the intrusion. Please continue." After that, Bei Yunj stuffed a few candies into the girl's pocket and quickly left the scene without blushing. The girl. How could he be flirted with by a girl? However, in the next second, the girl's eyes widened when she saw the man Bei Yunj was walking towards. Master Du. What was even more unbelievable to the girl was that the unbelievably beautiful girl had burrowed her head into Hoshida's coat. "You've grown up. You even admitted your mistake to me?" When Hoshidu saw Bei Yunj walking over expressionlessly, the corners of his upturned eyes were filled with amusement. He could not help but find it funny. Yes, it's quite embarrassing. A certain Pei, who was in her arms, sighed and could not help but touch her. End of this chapter. Chapter 1053. After a while, the man's low chuckle drifted into Bei Yunj's ears. It was a little ticklish. Bei Yunj was speechless. Sensing that the person in his arms was messing around, the man quickly pressed her hand down and smiled casually. "If you want to, you can do it in the car later." Bei Yunj was speechless. At this moment, Suyu suddenly smiled and said, "So it's the one from Master Du's family. I've heard of her for a long time." He had been wondering what the person from Master Du's family would be like when Yu Hanran said that she was unruly. He could not guess that she would have such a personality. Suyu was quite interested. He looked straight at Bei Yunj, but when he sensed Hoshida's faint smile, he immediately looked away. This was the first time he knew that Hoshidu was so possessive of someone. He could not even look at her. "Suyu, are you very free?" Hoshida glanced at him casually. He did not really care that his child had recognized the wrong person. "Master Du, your girl even recognized you wrongly. She doesn't seem to care much about you." Suyu was not afraid of death. Bei Yunja's eyelids twitched. She did not expect this person to bring trouble to her. Then Bei Yunj tugged at the man's suit cuffs and coaxed him skillfully. "Brother, if he wasn't wearing a pad, I definitely wouldn't have recognized him wrongly." Suyu's smile froze. Suyu was not considered short. His height of 182 centimeters was very proper, but Hoshida's height of 187 centimeters made Suyu feel a little pressured. Therefore, Suyu would occasionally add a pad. However, he did not expect Bei Yunj to have such sharp eyes. At this moment, Suyu looked at Hoshidu and glanced at his shoes. Master Du was too much. "Let's go." The man smiled silently and naturally held his little girl's hand and led her back to the car. Sung Su drove the car that sent Bei Yunj to K Continent Academy and left. On the other side, Hoshidu was sitting in the driver's seat. Bei Yunj was sitting beside him, glancing at the man from time to time. What do you want to ask? Huashidu asked. What's the girl's name? Bei Yunj felt sorry for the girl. Her name is Su Jihuan. Bei Yunj turned to look at him but didn't say anything. Su Yu is the adopted son of the Su family. It was decided long ago that he had to marry Su Jihuan. Huashidu was not interested in these things and only knew roughly what was going on. Bei Yunj didn't ask any more questions. She could tell that Su Jihuan liked Su Yu very much. But in Su Yu's eyes, there was no trace of Su Jihuan. Are you interested in Su Jihuan? The man asked casually. Bei Yunj. What? The man's sexy Adam's apple moved slightly and he chuckled. If Yunyan likes it, I'll ask the Su family to send her over to play with you tomorrow. Bei Yunj. What a tyrant. I have to go out tomorrow. The man raised an eyebrow. How's the inspection today? Hearing this, Bei Yunj stopped playing with her phone. Not long after, she looked at him with curved eyes. Dr. Luo was a little busy today and didn't have time to do the inspection. Brother, did you bring me to K-Continent for this inspection? The man looked at the little girl beside him through the rearview mirror. Soon, Huashidu parked the car at the side and stared at her with his pale-colored eyes. Yunyan, you don't like it? Bei Yunj couldn't stand the man's staring gaze, and instinctively wanted to open the car door. But the man locked the car even faster. Bei Yunj turned to look at him. Question mark. End of chapter. Chapter 1054. Solve the problem first before getting out of the car. The man had just picked up the silver lighter when he thought of the person beside him. He could only throw it aside and lean back lazily. Bei Yunj also insisted. I want to get out of the car and solve the problem later. The man glanced at her with his pale-colored eyes. After a few seconds, his gaze swept across the surrounding buildings. He chuckled. That's fine too. Before Bei Yunj could get out of the car, she heard the man say slowly, if you really want to get out of the car, let's go to the hotel next door and get a suite to talk. Bei Yunj. Huashidu also noticed that Bei Yunj was against this physical examination. However, if he really let her get out of the car, he was indeed afraid that Bei Yunj would avoid him in the future. Bei Yunj licked her red lips. The emotions in her eyes flickered. She looked very calm, but her fingertips were slightly white as she gripped her sleeves. In an instant, the complicated and frustrated emotions in her heart surged into the dark side that she had been trying her best to suppress. Soon, Bei Yunj looked up at the man. Most of the coldness and frustration in her heart disappeared, leaving only uneasiness and loneliness. She lowered her head and tried to sound him out. Brother, to you, I'm not your pet, right? As soon as she finished speaking. For a moment, Huashidu wanted to throw this child out. The atmosphere was silent for a while. The man looked out of the car window, loosened his tie with one hand, and unbuttoned his collar. Then, a soft laugh that sounded like a mocking laugh floated into Bei Yunj's ears. Bei Yunj. This seemed to be the first time she saw Huashidu angry. Bei Yunj was about to organize her words when the man suddenly turned around and leaned towards her. He lifted her chin with one hand and narrowed his eyes carelessly as he looked at her face carefully. Bei Yunj looked into the man's dark eyes, which seemed to contain a terrifying aggressiveness. His posture was still light as he sneered. I look like I have a fetish for beasts, Yunyan? After a while, Bei Yunj, who had just regained her senses. Who was he scolding? Huashidu glanced at Bei Yunj, who was silent. All right, I have to drive. Big brother. Bei Yunj was about to say something when Huashidu reached out without turning his head and pulled down her loose hoodie to cover Bei Yunj's face. Be quiet for a while. Bei Yunj, who couldn't see clearly. It was obvious that this person was really angry. Back at the manor, Zhong Xinglin's phone could not be reached for the time being, so Bei Yunj could only call Si Qingyan. He doesn't know about this, does he? Bei Yunj held the watering can in one hand, but her eyes were not on the expensive flowers. Si Qingyan was silent for a while. Old master probably didn't tell your husband, but why don't you want to tell him? Isn't the one in your family good enough for you? He had seen Mr. He a few times. He was handsome and noble, a classic example of a gentleman who could charm young girls to death. He almost doted on Bei Yunj until she was in a mess. Bei Yunji's hand, which was holding the watering can, paused for a moment before she smiled slowly and said, I feel inferior. Can't I? Who the hell would believe that you felt inferior? Si Qingyan rolled his eyes. If you don't want to say it, then don't. I'm busy too. All right, then I'll go coax him. Bei Yunji answered and really hung up the call. Si Qingyan. Was this something a human would do? A second ago, she thought that it was a sadistic love drama, but the next second, she was coaxing a man. P.S. Master Pei's illness was also the reason why Master Pei felt inferior in her previous life. Because she really liked Master Du, she tore open a dark side of her. But she wouldn't torture him. She would heal him. Our Master Pei would eat the sweetest candy and like the best people. Master Pei. As long as I'm not a person with a sweet mouth, sadomasochism won't be able to catch up to me. Continue to do it at night. End of this chapter. Chapter 1055. At the door of the study. The moment Zhou Yu came over, he saw Bei Yunji leaning against the wall. He was surprised. What are you standing here for? Nothing. After Bei Yunji finished speaking, she looked at Zhou Yu and said, Assistant Zhou, I seem to have made your master Du angry. Zhou Yu looked at Bei Yunji's gaze and knew that Bei Yunji was asking him to help her come up with an idea. To be honest, no one dared to make Master Du angry. Zhou Yu thought about it and suddenly felt that something was wrong. How could Master Du bear to be angry with Miss Pei? If Miss Pei acted coquettishly, Master Du would even be willing to pluck the moon for her. Soon, Bei Yunji felt that the way Zhou Yu looked at her had changed, as if he was looking at a scumbag. His gaze was filled with accusation and disbelief. Bei Yunji. It was a pity that Hoshida's two assistants did not perform crosstalk. Suddenly, the phone in Zhou Yu's pocket vibrated. He bowed slightly to Bei Yunji and smiled politely. Miss Pei, I'm sorry. Master Du is looking for me. Bei Yunji. In the study. Master Du, Zhou Yu called out. After thinking for a moment, he said carefully, Miss Pei is waiting at the door. Hoshida glanced at him casually. You want to call her in? Zhou Yu immediately shut up. For a moment, Zhou Yu wanted to know what Miss Pei had done. There's something going on in Continent K's academy. Go and settle it. Hoshidu threw the documents to Zhou Yu. Let their director sign this agreement. Hearing this, Zhou Yu instinctively walked closer and picked up the contract on the desk. He opened it and saw that it was a confidentiality agreement. Zhou Yu was one of the few people who knew Bei Yunji's true identity. He was slightly surprised. Director Donner knows about it? He reported it. Hoshida's slender index finger tapped on the table gently. His voice was calm, but Zhou Yu felt a chill. Zhou Yu felt a chill down his spine. Dean Donner was too bold. He knew how important this was to Country A, so he didn't provoke them on the surface. Instead, he leaked this information to the higher-ups. He could also fight for some benefits for himself. However, what Tang Dina didn't expect was that this message would be sent to Hoshidu. Understood. I'll get the dean to sign this document. Zhou Yu nodded. Then Hoshidu asked unhurriedly, I heard that there's a vice principal of K Continent Academy who is from Country A? Zhou Yu was stunned for a moment. Soon he bowed slightly to Hoshidu. Yes, Director Donner has reached the age where he should delegate power. After that, Zhou Yu sighed in his heart. What kind of bewitching potion did Miss Pei cast on Master Du? Next, before Zhou Yu could regain his senses, he heard the man ask casually, She's been outside for so long. Aren't you going to let her in? Zhou Yu. A short while later, Bei Yunji saw Zhou Yu come out with a document in his hand. Miss Pei, please go in. Zhou Yu forced a smile. Brother, have you calmed down? Bei Yunji hesitated. Zhou Yu's smile cracked slightly. After a while, Bei Yunji pushed open the door of the study and saw the man inside reading a document. A pair of gold-rimmed glasses rested on the bridge of his nose. His collar was loose and casual. He was so lazy and sexy that it made people blush and their hearts race. Looking for me? Bei Yunji didn't speak for a long time. The man's low and magnetic voice sounded unhurriedly. P.S. More in the morning. Good night. End of chapter. Chapter 1056. Bei Yunji regained her senses. Even the words she had organized outside were disrupted by her thoughts. Brother, Before Bei Yunj could finish speaking, the phone in her pocket suddenly vibrated. Who would insist on calling at this time? Bei Yunj took it out and saw that it was a call from Si Qingyan. Her eyebrows moved as she glanced at Huashidu and quickly answered the call. Before she could speak, she heard Si Qingyan ask, Yunj, is your third brother all right? Bei Yunj's eyes moved. What's wrong? Don't tell me you don't know that your third brother is competing in Continent K and lost just now. Si Qingyan immediately asked when he heard this. It was only then that Bei Yunj remembered that Qin Lang had said that there was a competition recently. He lost? Bei Yunj's eyes darkened. According to the previous trend, Qin Lang had never competed in Continent K, and the first time he lost it was because his hand was injured. Yeah, I think something happened at the venue. Not only did Qin Lang lose the competition, he was also injured. I don't know if it's serious. Hearing this, Bei Yunj licked her red lips and was silent for a moment before she asked, Where's the address? After getting the address and hanging up the call, Bei Yunj noticed that the man had been looking at her. Are you going out? The man asked first. For a moment, Bei Yunj felt like she was no longer human. Bei Yunj nodded. Who knew after a while she heard the man say slowly, I thought you were here to coax me. Bei Yunj was speechless. Soon, in the back seat, Bei Yunj looked at the man beside her from time to time. However, the man was sitting upright with a book in his hand. His handsome eyes were light and calm, but he did not look at her. Suddenly, Brother, is the book that good? Bei Yunj's beautiful eyes curved as she leaned over and asked with a smile, Why don't you look at me more? Huashidu saw the young lady coming over, and gently pressed his fingers against her head. But a certain someone, who had always been experienced, rubbed her forehead against his finger like a spoiled child. Before he could react, the book in the man's hand was snatched away. Bei Yunj flipped through a few pages and raised her eyebrows. You don't look as good as me. After saying this, Bei Yunj's book was taken away by a slender and beautiful hand. We're here. The car had just stopped, and the man's unhurried voice sounded. Bei Yunj. All right, I'll have to coax her next time. However, before Bei Yunj could get out of the car, someone suddenly grabbed her waist from behind. The world spun and Bei Yunj's back was suddenly pressed against a warm chest. Brother? Before she could regain her senses, her face was covered by something furry. The tip of her nose was filled with the unique cold and pleasant scent of a man. Huashidu reached out and pulled down the scarf, revealing the little girl's exquisite face. All right, you can go out now. Bei Yunj unconsciously curled the corners of her lips. Brother, you're still so nice to me even when you're angry? Huashidu glanced at her. He was already used to a certain someone's insatiable behavior. He sneered softly, and his magnetic and lazy voice sounded casually. Didn't you already have me under your thumb? In the stadium, Bei Yunj had just reached the door when she was stopped. Miss, this is the preliminary round. The audience seats are not open. Only the insiders can. Before the attendant could finish speaking, he saw a girl wearing a white hat swiping the black card in her hand on the magnetic card machine. After being doted on by the big shots, I'm wild. /book/83224/. Chapter 1057. Very soon, the barricade door opened automatically, and even the sound of the manager's announcement could be heard. However, the security guard did not notice all this. He only knew that this was an internal member. Where are Qin Lang and the rest? The girl lowered the brim of her hat, and only her sharp chin could be seen. Miss, they're still backstage. I'll bring you there. After the security guard came back to his senses, he immediately brought her over. Backstage. What do you all mean? Almighty Qin was injured because of you. What kind of attitude is that? Bei Yunj had just entered when she heard the confrontation inside. He's obviously not as good as others. I finally know why Almighty Qin has never lost a competition. Before the staff could speak, another person in a blue uniform sneered. As long as he loses the competition, he can push the blame to others. Isn't that enough? You. The hot-tempered team member was about to say something when the coach beside him immediately stopped him. That's enough. Then the coach looked at that person. Xiaoji, you and Almighty Qin are not on good terms. Watch your words and actions. After watching the show, Xiaoji sneered contemptuously and left. Qin Lang had been popular in the esports scene for so many years. It was time for him to be replaced. Almighty Qin, I'm very sorry. This time, it was our people's mistake that caused you to be injured. However, this competition can't be delayed. Do you want to change people? The organizer asked. If it wasn't for the fact that their referee team had an anti-fan, Qin Lang wouldn't have been injured. However, even if it was because of the organizer's mistake, they wouldn't suspend the competition because of this accident. After all, it wasn't easy for the team under EG Corporation to win against Qin Lang. Of course, they wouldn't want to let go of this opportunity. What are you doing? If it wasn't for the organizers, my almighty Qin would. Before the other team member could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Qin Lang. Go. Everyone turned and saw Bei Yunj standing not far away. She responded faintly and walked towards them. Sister Qin is really good. How could she recognize you when you're dressed so tightly? The team member muttered in disbelief. Bei Yunj sized up Qin Lang's bandaged hand and asked, Is your hand okay? Even Qin Lang's voice became gentler. It's okay. The doctor said that she'll be fine after a few days. Gu, or why are you incontinent, K? Almighty Qin, why are you talking nonsense? The doctor clearly said that if we don't treat her as soon as possible, sooner or later. Before the team member could finish, he felt Qin Lang's cold gaze and immediately shut his mouth. I'm here to take a look around the K-Continent Academy. Bei Yunj was silent for a moment. Why don't you come back with me today? I'm afraid that won't do. Almighty Qin has to stay in the place arranged by the organizers, or else. Before the staff member could finish speaking, their eyes met with Bei Yunj's languid and beautiful eyes. But at this moment, they were unbelievably cold. What's going on? Suddenly, a clear and cold voice attracted everyone's attention. Everyone turned around and saw a woman in a purple suit walking over. Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows as she recognized this person. Jiangji. Director Jiang, something happened to Godly Qin's team. The staff explained to Jiangji in a low voice. Jiangji also quickly recognized Bei Yunj. Jealousy flashed across her eyes and she unconsciously clenched her fists. She didn't understand why Cui Hingchuan had to have this woman. Jiangji smiled again. Miss Pei, we meet again. End of chapter. Chapter 1058. Bei Yunj smirked. No wonder you dared to do such a business in Yincheng. It turns out that Miss Jiang's roots are in Continent K. So President Jiang and this lady know each other. The staff immediately smiled apologetically. Miss Pei, although we know each other, I can't do such unfair things for you, right? You can understand this, right? After Jiangji finished speaking with a smile, she seemed to have vented her anger and looked down at Bei Yunj. Everyone had thought that the two of them were old acquaintances. But now it seemed like they had been holding grudges for a long time. Gu, or I'll settle this. You wait in the lounge. Before Qin Lang could finish, Bei Yunj interrupted him. Go back and rest first. For a moment, the atmosphere was tense. Even Qin Lang's team members felt that Almighty Qin's sister was too arbitrary and domineering. She wanted Almighty Qin to rest. Could she settle it? Or did she think that someone would delay the competition for her sake? Go. Before Qin Lang could finish, he met his sister's eyes and immediately shut his mouth. After a while, Qin Lang could only nod and use his eyes to signal the other team members to calm Bei Yunj down, and not let her be impulsive. After they left, Bei Yunj's smile disappeared and her beautiful eyes were filled with hostility. Why? Do you think that you don't have to take responsibility for hurting my family? After she finished speaking, everyone was stunned. They didn't expect Bei Yunj to pursue the matter with the organizers. The staff members were in the wrong. Jiangji smiled and said, Miss Pei, what compensation do you want? Miss Jiang, do you think you have the status to negotiate with me? Bei Yunj sneered softly. She raised her eyebrows and sat down in her seat. Before she came, Bei Yunj had already contacted someone. Now she just had to wait. As expected, Jiangji's face had already darkened. The staff beside her was even more sarcastic. Miss Pei, Who do you think you can get to negotiate with? It doesn't matter if Almighty Qin wants to compete or not. The maps of the gods can still be played without him. If you know what's good for you, you can still stay and watch the competition. If you don't know what's good for you, then I can only ask you to leave. Hearing this, Jiangji's complexion improved slightly. Jiangji smiled. Miss Pei, I understand that you're in a bad mood, but rules are rules. How can they be changed so easily? The staff member patted his collar and glanced at Bei Yunj with disdain. If there's nothing else, I'll let Almighty Qin continue the competition. Hearing this, the team members couldn't help but look at Bei Yunj. However, there was no movement from Bei Yunj. It seemed like she was here to throw a tantrum, but Qin Lang was a real siscon. However, unexpectedly, before the staff left, a man in a suit and leather shoes suddenly appeared in everyone's line of sight, panting. This person looks very familiar. Everyone was discussing. Suddenly, someone recognized him. It's Mr. Colin from the Delaney Group. Why would this person appear here? Jiangji couldn't help but look at Colin in disbelief. This was the general manager of the Delaney Group's Continent K branch. Normally, even she wouldn't have the chance to see him. Mr. Colin, how did you? When the staff saw Colin, his smiling face immediately changed. However, Colin didn't pay attention to anyone. Instead, he tidied up his suit and immediately walked in front of Bei Yunj. Miss Pei, sorry to keep you waiting. End of chapter. Chapter 1059. Bei Yunj looked at her watch and did not say anything else. Instead, she curled her lips with interest. Colin, this stadium belongs to Delaney, right? Colin nodded. Yes, Mississippi, he immediately smiled. If you like it, I believe Mr. Delaney is willing to give it to you. Hearing this, the staff member's smile stiffened. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Indeed. The next moment, Bei Yunj curled her lips. Mr. Colin, you don't have to be so polite. However, I do want to borrow this land for a few days. Colin could not help but ask, Miss Pei, why are you suddenly interested in the stadium? I'm not too interested. Bei Yunj laughed lazily. I'm afraid that someone will chase me out. You must be joking. Although the people who have been setting up the stadium these few days are all from EG Corporation. But if EG Corporation really dares to chase you out, aren't they afraid that Mr. Vic will pursue the matter? As soon as she finished speaking, the staff member's heart trembled, and he instantly felt weak. Mr. Vic, that was the founder of EG Corporation. What was the background of Almighty Qin's sister? She got Mr. Colin to receive her, and even had contact with Mr. Vic. At this moment, only Qin Lang and the vice-captain of Vic's team, who had missed the competition but had met him at the auction, knew a little about the inside story. After a while, Colin seized the time to gain her favor. Don't worry, Miss Pei. As long as you're willing, the right to use this venue will belong to you. Everyone heard Bei Yunj's interested voice and said lazily, Okay, then I'll have to consider if I should chase you out. The staff member's face turned green, and he almost fainted. He did not expect things to turn around like this. The situation was obvious now. The organizer was not the one who could chase them out, but Bei Yunj. If Bei Yunj was even a little unhappy, she could kick all of them out of the door at any time. Jiang Ji was the first to panic. She gritted her teeth. This land was rented to EG Corporation by the Delaney Group. How can you give it to others just like that? Colin frowned and glanced at Jiang Ji unhappily. However, he smiled generously. Miss, you probably don't know that EG Group has never rented our land. Because of Mr. Vic, it had been used by EG Corporation for free all these years. Of course, if Miss Pei wants it too, we'll consider you first. This was also what Delaney had instructed him before he came. As long as it was related to Bei Yunj, no matter what, they had to side with Bei Yunj. He had to coax the god of fortune. At this moment, Jiang Ji's face alternated between red and green, and the staff stuttered, Mr. Colin, our Maps of the Gods competition is only halfway through, how can we? I'm sorry, but we need Miss Pei's approval. Colin smiled. My mission this time is to assist Miss Pei. The staff member looked like he was about to cry. Jiang Ji gritted her teeth and looked at Bei Yunj. She didn't know where this woman got her connections from. Bei Yunj curled her lips and walked slowly in front of Jiang Ji. Her eyes were unruly, but her voice was gentle. Boss Jiang might not be used to it yet. In my place, I'm the rule. Everyone, you can also consider whether it's better to play here or be thrown out. Bei Yunj unwrapped the candy and smiled slowly. End of chapter. Chapter 1060. The staff member's body stiffened. After a long time, he could only bow to Bei Yunj. Miss Pei, I'll go ask our manager first. Jiang Ji bit her lip and stared at Bei Yunj with red eyes. However, not long after, the manager hurried over. After nodding slightly to Colin, he also looked at Bei Yunj. The manager bowed slightly. Miss Pei, I'm sorry I didn't have time to find you just now. My surname is Yang. When Bei Yunj swiped the card and came in, there was news in the manager's office. But Bei Yunj left so quickly that he didn't know who had the senior management card. Manager Yang. Bei Yunj nodded. Manager Yang immediately smiled. Miss Pei, I'm very sorry about Almighty Qin's injury. Since it was your request to delay the competition, we naturally have no objections. But the longest delay can't be more than 7 days. I hope Miss Pei can understand. During this period, Almighty Qin can freely change his team members. I understand. I'll take him to check on his injury first. Bei Yunj glanced at Manager Yang. As for the person who deliberately hurt him, I also hope the organizers can give me a satisfactory result. Miss Pei, don't worry. I hope your friendship with Mr. Vic will not be affected by these things. As soon as he finished speaking, Colin couldn't help but look at Manager Yang. Old colleagues. They were all here to coax the god of fortune. At this moment, Qin Lang's team members were all in a daze. They didn't expect that the competition could really be delayed. Miss Pei's network was heaven-defying. In the end, when the delay was announced, everyone was shocked, including the members of these teams. And EG Group's way of handling it was very humane. In these 7 days, all the members of the competition would enjoy the best treatment at the top hotel, and would also be given a team consolation fee as compensation. In the laboratory, Luo Xia's eyelids twitched. After hearing Sung Su's message, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch. What's the matter? Asked a handsome man with shoulder-length blonde hair beside her. There's a patient today. Luo Xia pressed between his eyebrows. He didn't expect that Miss Pei would use him so easily. Yo, don't you always have Sunday off? There are still people who dare to give you patience? The blonde man asked with a smile. You'll soon know who dares to give it to me. Luo Xia sneered. With Huashidu around, he could not refuse at all. Soon, everyone saw a handsome young man with short silver hair, and a girl with long curly hair appear in front of them. Miss Pei, you're quite bold. How dare you bring anyone to my laboratory? In an instant, Luo Xia's eyes were full of thought. Wasn't Bei Yunj afraid that he would tell Huashidu? She actually brought a man to his place? This is my third brother Qin Lang. His hand is injured. Please take a look at him, Dr. Luo. Bei Yunj tried to sound polite. Luo Xia looked at Qin Lang with some surprise. Although they didn't look alike at all, he was still a handsome young man. Girl, is this your friend? Qin Lang turned around and asked. Bei Yunj, no. Luo Xia's eyelids twitched. Mr. Qin, come with me for a checkup first, another member in a white coat said. Qin Lang nodded and followed him in. Soon Luo Xia pursed his lips. Miss Pei, I won't be seeing patients today. Bei Yunj gestured for him to look at the computer. The contract for the import of the latest batch of medical equipment from Stevens Research Institute has been sent to Dr. Luo's email. P.S. Good night. End of chapter. Chapter 1061. With that said, Luo Xia froze and stared at Bei Yunj for a while before he got up and went in. On the other hand, the blonde man followed beside Luo Xia excitedly, but his eyes were fixed on Bei Yunj. Luo Xia, don't you think that girl is very beautiful? Of course. Luo Xia glanced at him coldly. If she wasn't beautiful, how could this woman be so bewitching? The blonde man suddenly poked his shoulder. Luo Xia, I have something I need your help with. Hearing this, Luo Xia looked at him. Soon. It's not the first time Mr. Qin's hand has been injured. He needs to be hospitalized. Luoxia glanced at Bei Yunj. I have a temporary hospital. I can arrange for him to go there. How long will it take? Bei Yunj raised an eyebrow. If the surgery is successful, it will take at least 3 months. I will arrange 3 surgeries for him. Before the second surgery, he can't compete no matter what, Luoxia said calmly. Hearing this, Bei Yunj frowned. What about Qin Lang's competition? The blonde man beside him poked Luoxia anxiously with his elbow. Only then did Luoxia frown and glance at his friend unhappily. In the end, Luoxia had no choice but to ask, Does Miss Pei have time? Bei Yunj glanced at the two of them. I have something on tomorrow. You can do it today too, the blonde man said happily. After noticing Bei Yunj's gaze, Luoxia could only explain, My friend is a director and has recently been hired for a perfume commercial. He wants you to be the female lead. The blonde man could not help but glare at Luoxia, blaming him for introducing himself too casually. He immediately introduced himself with a smile. Miss Pei, I'm Brennan, the director of our nation. My films have won 3 Mayork Awards. The Mayork Awards were the highest award in the film industry. If it was Qin Yu, he would definitely recognize this famous director, Brennan, who had created countless best actors and best actresses. Brennan stared at her with bright eyes and asked urgently, Excuse me, Miss Pei, do you have any thoughts of acting? In his opinion, not only was Bei Yunj stunning, but she was also very intelligent. She was obviously beautiful and languid, but when she raised her eyebrows, she was in high spirits. This was the type he had never met before. He was also confident that with Bei Yunj as the female lead, they would be able to produce the most stunning youthful literary film. No, Brennan. The rejection was very straightforward, without any pleasantries. Then how about an advertisement? Is that all right, Miss Pei? Brennan looked at her pitifully. He still wanted to try Bei Yunj's talent. If he really had the talent, it wouldn't be too late for him to pester him. Bei Yunj glanced at him indifferently. Brennan also hinted to Luoxia to help persuade him. He was a famous director, yet he had to shamelessly do such a thing. Luoxia could only say, Miss Pei, my friend is obsessed with acting. If you don't agree to shoot the advertisement, he might follow you in the middle of the night. Brennan's smile froze. Bei Yunj. Soon. The corners of Bei Yunj's lips curled up. Sure. Can Dr. Luo help me with the matter I troubled you with last time? Luoxia suddenly remembered that Bei Yunj had asked him to help fool Huashidu. He would dare to do this? Luoxia, you don't even dare to agree to a young lady's request. Are you still a man? Seeing that there was hope for his advertisement, Brennan immediately punched Luoxia. Luoxia was speechless. Was this young lady's request normal? End of chapter. Chapter 1062. Miss Pei, don't worry. I'll agree on his behalf. There's definitely no problem. Brennan immediately patted his chest and promised. Luoxia wanted to speak, but Brennan quickly covered his mouth. Since we're brothers, I'll help you. What's wrong? Luoxia's expression turned ugly. After Qin Lang came out, he was immediately arranged to be hospitalized nearby for treatment. Brennan also rushed Luoxia to do a further examination for Qin Lang. On the other hand, Bei Yunj and Brennan went to a nearby hotel. In just half an hour, the equipment and cameras were all ready. Miss Pei, why don't you change your clothes first? Brennan smiled, but his hands were nervously rubbing. Okay. Bei Yunj sent Huashidu the last location message. Miss Pei, are you looking for someone to bring you home? Actually, I can send you home. Brennan was very enthusiastic. No need. After Bei Yunj finished speaking, she followed the makeup artist and walked in. Brennan did not feel defeated. Instead, his eyes lit up as he looked at Bei Yunj. Director, this person has a bad temper. Where did you hire her? Someone sighed. Really? I think she's quite cool. It wasn't easy for me to hire her. You guys have to work harder. Brennan snorted. He had a feeling that this advertisement would be popular. The others were speechless. Was this the God's face filter? 20 minutes later, everyone finally knew why Brennan's filter was so big. Brennan had actually taken on this advertisement for more than half a year. However, he had interviewed artistes of all sizes, from international movie actresses to theater students. No one could meet Brennan's high standards. This made everyone feel that Brennan was too stubborn. How could anyone have a god's face that walked out of a painting? But at this moment, the staff members of the advertisement shoot looked at the person walking over and felt that their faces were slapping, regardless of gender. When they saw the scene with their own eyes, their eyes almost popped out. In the beginning, Brennan had defined the theme of this perfume as purity and desire. Simply put, it was high class and sexy. Hence, he had not considered Asians. The clothes he prepared were also more palatial. However, when he saw Bei Yunj, Brennan vaguely felt that the girl in front of him could break his fixed thinking. Therefore, he quickly contacted a friend who was a collector and sent over his favorite sandalwood folding fan. It turned out that his intuition was right. He looked at the girl in front of him. Her black hair was wet, and water droplets slid down her slender and fair neck to her loose collar. However, she didn't show any emotion. Her pair of lazy and bright eyes contained a distant playfulness. Instead, she had an aura that made people unable to get close to her. Bei Yunj was only wearing a long, translucent robe that clung to her body after getting wet. Her slender and beautiful hands were holding a folding fan, but the staff had already made sure that there was no risk of her being exposed. How are we going to film this? Bei Yunj's tone was still lazy. She lowered her eyes and played with the folding fan in her hand. As for the female staff member who was in close contact with him, when she saw that the person in front of her had wet eyelashes, she inexplicably felt her face turn hot. This was too much. The current female Gu King was killing people online? Brennan coughed softly. He didn't dare to go near Bei Yunj. Instead, he sat in front of the equipment and explained the details of the shoot through the microphone. It wasn't only Brennan. The others also didn't dare to look at Bei Yunj. Where did this demoness come from? If they took another look, their hearts would uncontrollably race. End of chapter. Chapter 1063. Bei Yunj was very perceptive. After hearing this, she followed Brennan's instructions and stood in the fountain of the goddess statue. Behind her was a magnificent dome hall, and the moonlight was hazy. However, Bei Yunj leaned against the statue of the goddess and raised her eyebrows lazily with a folding fan. The water droplets that sprinkled on the ground were even more eye-catching than the moonlight and the statue of the goddess. At this moment, the people not far away happened to see this scene. The girl leaned against the pool. The surface of the pool was sparkling. The statue of the goddess, the moonlight, and her intertwined into an unforgettable scene. If this was in a movie, it would definitely be a classic. Cut. Brennan was extremely excited. Miss Pei, you're too smart. A newbie who was filming for the first time could actually pass in one take. She was too talented. Miss Pei, it's a pity that you're not in the industry. Brennan said impatiently, as if he had discovered an excellent piece of unpolished jade, and couldn't wait to let everyone know. But then, Bei Yunj saw a man not far away. Her eyes curved. Brother. Brennan immediately perked up. Miss Pei's brother. Bei Yunj did not agree, but if Bei Yunj's brother had thought it through, then he was not far from success. Brennan could not wait to turn his head, but when he met the man who was still holding a cigarette in his hand, his smile froze. How could it be Master Du? Bei Yunj had just put on a towel and walked to Hoshida's side. After the man exhaled a faint mist, his pale-colored eyes finally landed on her, and the darkness in his eyes disappeared. Do you like acting? Bei Yunj smiled and said, just so. Hearing this, he reached out and brushed the wet hair on her neck. His tone was light and calm, but he seemed to be restraining himself. Go and dry your hair. Bei Yunj raised her eyebrows. She did not notice that the man's voice was hoarse with desire. She followed the staff back to change her clothes. Brennan, who had always liked to capture people's emotions, felt Hoshida's emotions for the first time. This wasn't any other kind of feeling. It was the most primitive and straightforward desire that a man had for a woman. Master, do you? Brennan stiffened, not knowing how to ask. The man was already looking at him with a faint smile. His well-proportioned hand under the sleeve of his suit slowly extinguished the cigarette butt. Brennan, did you find my subordinate for the actor you're looking for? Brennan was instantly petrified. Master Du, I don't know. Luoxia didn't tell him that Miss Pei was Master Du's woman. But now, even if they didn't want to, they had already done it. It was also the first time Brennan had been so bold. He braced himself and smiled obsequiously at Huashidu. Master Du, Miss Pei is really talented in acting. Look at the filming just now. Isn't it very lively? The corner of Tsung Su's mouth twitched. Was Brennan crazy? At this point, they were still thinking about letting Miss Pei enter the industry? I don't want anything from this shoot to be leaked. Huashida glanced at him and said slowly, I can arrange a suitable actor for you. Brennan's eyes widened in disbelief. No, Master Du, this is a work of art. How can you? The man's lips curled up non-committally as he asked lightly, Is that so? When Brennan heard this, he thought that he had a chance to fight for it, but he didn't expect the next sentence. Then give me the original and delete the rest. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.